Kelly, can you hear us, ma'am? Give me a thumbs up. Darren, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Well, good morning, everyone. So nice to see everybody in person. So welcome. Thank you again for here participating today. Again, just maybe a quick introduction. So Darryl Oliveira here, HACEM, as well as a Big Island representative on the HACEM. And I guess with that, we can start introductions, Luke.
Billy Bergen from the Big Island.
El Tinucio, Emergency Management Administrator from Kauai.
Linda Nagami Stroyford from Kauai.
Dorinda Wangao, Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
Carlos Rowe, Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
Matthew Wall, Hawaii Emergency Management Agency.
And Mona Curry, Island of Oahu.
Jerry Silva, HACEM, Milwaukee.
Hiro Toi, I'm the Director of Emergency Management, City and County of Honolulu.
Luke Myers, Administrator, HAIMA.
Steve Logan, Department of Defense.
We do have Kelly in the other room taking notes.
I know we have a full agenda. So Luke, if you had any remarks or General Logan?
General Logan for opening remarks, and then I pick up.
Nope, General Howard's out of town, so I'm just sitting in on behalf of him. I want to thank everybody for.
Well, welcome and good morning. I believe this is our first HACEM in-person meeting since the fourth quarter of 19. May have had one in Q1 of 2020. I'm trying to remember the last time we had the HEPIC HACEM meeting. It's been a long time. So thank you all for coming here today. We are leveraging the Business Recovery Center here at HAIMA, which is a product of the Obama EDA grant, and it's one of our nicer rooms, a little more modern technology and a little more like. So thank you all for being here. As we continue to transition away from the emergency side of COVID-19, continue to look at lessons learned and how can we make improvements here in state emergency management and larger public safety. And we'll be going through kind of a high level of some of those areas today. The other thing I just want to mention from an administrator perspective, we do have some potential change in state emergency management, obviously with the governor's transition that is coming. So from a cabinet perspective, including some of the positions here at HAIMA, we will assess and look at those opportunities. And the election is over, and Josh comes into their term. So we do acknowledge that. Have a discussion about planning on the 29 sides. So from a logistics perspective, obviously, if we have to evacuate the building, we'll rendezvous by the big tree that's over here. Hopefully that won't happen. We do have NCIS filming going on. And so they've been doing some drone flying and some other things, including blowing things up in the last days. We'll just have to be cognizant if we do have to evacuate for any reason, or restrooms are back through the double doors. Make your first left. Women's is the first door and men's is the next. And we'll be serving working lunch around here. Jump down to the next agenda item, the minutes from the 12th this year, electronically approved, and they should be binder. Appreciate you all signing on. For others that need any questions on the minutes from the last meeting? Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to jump down to the council member reports and updates. So what we did in the last meeting was we kind of flipped the agenda. We've done this in a number of the emergency management meetings. Instead of having HIEMA or the emergency management team kind of go through updates, we kind of flipped the script a little bit. And in the HACEM meeting, we had each of our council members report out on emergency management activities and open it up for questions. And then the same thing with our county emergency management partners that are here today. So with that said, we will start with Hawaii County, Daryl and Billy, and go from there.
Well, Dr. Bergen, I know he doesn't like to be called Dr. Bergen, but Dr. Bergen, out of respect, I would just maybe just welcome him to the group and really say thank you for joining the group on the HACEM. And really, I know he's very modest, but I'll say he's a very well-respected member of the community that has been engaged, both he and his entire family have been very engaged in our, welcome his knowledge, experience, and contributions to this. So I'll let you go first, sir.
Yeah, I am very pleased and honored to be able to be on this committee. I parallel serve on the Mauna Kea management, just like this is advisory, so we understand the parameters within which we work. And of course, I look forward to being an active participant. I look forward to trying to be a 100% attendees at meetings for the fact that we do need quorum, and it's important to serve in a physical capacity as well as virtual. So I guess my message is that I look forward, and remember, I just go by Billy. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments for Billy? I will say that one of the unique areas of Billy's background has to do with animals. And obviously, when we have incidents anywhere, we look at property, facilities and infrastructure and operations. But we have a lot of impacts on animals, whether they are domesticated or other in the islands. So in looking at the scope and kind of the composite of the HACEM group, Billy's background, I think, will, along with his other interests, bring a new perspective to the table. So we look forward to having that view as part of HACEM, sir. So thank you. So Daryl.
Well, nothing much to report other than everybody's been watching in the news what's going on with Mauna Loa, and we'll have an update later. But I just want to take a moment to acknowledge the HIEMA team that's been present with the community meetings, side by side with our county emergency management team and HBO, just trying to make sure the community is well informed of what could play out and how they could be better prepared and take action to take care of themselves. For some of those rural areas, they're going to be very limited in resources and infrastructure. It's really going to mean a community effort to prevent injury or worse from occurring out there. So look forward to that update. Other than I was sharing with Glenda earlier before the meeting started, it was really nice to hear from all the HACEM members on different perspectives of the resilience hubs or resilience efforts in the community at the core of that. And we all walked away with, there's many different models or concepts of that resilience hub, but at the core is really the community coming together and being aligned with emergency management or with government in how to take care of themselves. So again, it was just really good and interesting to hear the different concepts around the state and maybe even opportunity to share ideas and successes, as well as partner on best practices and share information. So look forward to more discussion on that. And obviously we're all waiting to see the election and what the new governor will have maybe as a directive of his body. Thank you.
Questions or comments for Daryl? Lorinda was still working on getting some input. Lots of conversations still on the resiliency hubs terminology being used from an emergency management perspective and some of the other stakeholders. So I know we still have a report out on that, Daryl.
Yep.
Okay, going to move down to Maui. At this point in time, we still have a vacancy for Maui. we did have an option or two, but that was gone by the governor's office. So again, in trying to, looking at the expanded scope of HACEM, two of the suggestions that we had for Governor Ige, and we got a couple of potential inquiries from Hamilton and HAH, somebody from the health side. We think coming out of the pandemic that maybe having somebody from the healthcare industry, or the other side was tourism. Again, trying to look at it not just from an incident management or response perspective, but kind of a broader perspective. But had a couple conversations with Herman, if there are members of the community in any of the islands over there, maybe an advocate that we could. Time is kind of running short with the governor gig, but definitely with the governor, we can put that forward. So. Okay, I'm gonna move down to Oahu and I'll turn it over to Jerry. Thanks, sir.
Good morning. Well, as may know, my interest is in the elderly because I are one myself. But the other thing is that I spent quite a bit of time over the last decade working with AARP as their state president. And because of this last go around, AARP decided to host 4 webinars with a focus on the elderly. And I think those turned out very successfully. One of the new parts of that was we were kind enough to get John Cummings to come talk to people about safety in high rises, where to shelter there. And I think we want to pursue that more. But I can tell you that last week AARP put this series of webinars in its 2023 plan. So I think we'll see more of that.
Questions or comments for Jerry? You know, something that has come up, Jerry, in light of Hurricane Ian in Florida, especially the Myers area, there's a very large retirement community, and with the storm surge and the wind situations that were impacted, there may be an opportunity, some cross connection with AARP in Florida to see. There were just a lot of challenges with the forecast track and some of those populations that just can't get up and evacuate. So there may be an opportunity from Florida EM and AARP if there's some interest there. So great.
Could I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead.
If these are webinars, but many of the elderly are not able to get onto the internet or are not facile enough to do that. Is there any other options for getting this information to them?
There is, we can convene, or the AARP can convene community meetings, can have in place, not webinars, but seminars. Yeah. The only reason we did it this year is there was no other alternative.
I'm just looking at some areas of Kauai may not have the internet access that make that usable or not easily accessible, I would say.
Well, I don't think I'm spilling the beans, but one of the other things that they are looking at now is partnership with Sea Grant. See if we can spread the word about Dennis Wong's book, The Homeowner's Guide, especially section 4. So we're going to try to formalize the training on this a little bit more and let you know next go around.
Okay.
And then one thing for me, do they still give out backpacks when they do their presentations, like in person?
They do, but we don't have thousands of backpacks, so they're kind of selective about that. I think they
Okay.
gave some away out on the North Shore,
We did get some, I think, 2
Yeah.
years ago.
but it was a cost thing.
Okay, yeah.
Is that, are those backpacks specifically for the AARP members or are they just for everyone who
No,
attends?
anything that they do goes out to anybody. So
Oh.
you don't have to be a member. It'd be nice if they were, but no, you don't have to at all.
And they had emergency supplies, right?
Yes.
I would recommend trying to get those shops with the backpacks.
by the way, we only did, well, webinar goes worldwide, but, you know, our focus has been on the wall, especially with the, high rises, because we know that there are 320 high rises on this island, and they're not all great shelter options, but some of them are.
Additional questions or comments for Jerry? Adam?
Yeah, Jerry, do you know if webinars were recorded, or they, presentation shared to other islands that have limited bandwidth? Maybe we could put them on thumb drives and send them out to make them available in senior centers where people could come and view them.
Let me go check that because, you know, they record everything. Whether they still have them on hand, something else, but I suspect so. Adam, let me get back to that.
If there's an issue with bandwidth and with people not being able to connect to the internet, it might be as simple as putting a copy of the file on a thumb drive, sending it out to an interested sponsor in one of those areas, so they can just show it in the meeting room.
Yeah. Or putting it on
You know,
the
now that you mentioned it,
television.
big access stations, on Neighbor Island.
Yeah, could
You might-
certainly go on.
Public access. Okay.
Yeah.
Naleo on the Big Island.
Question, what's your definition of high rise? How many stories?
We kind of struggled with that, but, just in-house, we said maybe, over 4 stories.
Okay.
But yeah, there are a lot of buildings that are well over 4 stories.
Yeah, so we have a first
Only
story,
have two.
equalizer, carry on.
And
Somebody also has
Honolulu.
this terrace, yeah.
Yeah, it's terrace, but it's still. Okay.
One thing on the backpacks maybe to consider, and we've had, Jaime has had a couple of conversations with some private sector partners, either Home Depot, Lowe's, or City Mill. Maybe there's an opportunity, if the counties may be doing this already, but maybe there's an opportunity statewide to partner with City Mill or one of the Home Depot or Lowe's and see if we could, come up with a state-specific backpack in partnership with AARP to help Jerry from a funding perspective. I've seen other models like that in other states, so maybe that's something.
Target usually very willing to do that kind of stuff. They're very big into emergency management.
Do any of the counties, do you all have any of those, like with City Mill or Home Depot or Lowe's, donation of outreach type of equipment?
We haven't done donations, but we
Okay.
have done, set up like booths
Yeah,
at
yeah.
their store and outreach at the beginning of hurricane season. We haven't done
A fair,
the last few years.
during this fair.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept.
Have donations to federal agents, they were state agents.
Additional comments or questions for Jerry?
We should,
Yeah,
Void.
it should go to foundation.
yeah, the void organizations do it.
Yeah.
Good morning. Just a note, and then I'll talk a little bit about the Resilience Hub up in Haula. But some of you know that I was formerly working for FEMA as a reservist after I retired as an emergency manager, but I just resigned that because my daughter's expecting her first child.
Congratulations.
Thank you. So I just resigned that like right at the hurricane in Florida. So I missed that whole deployment and I'm really sad about it too, because I was ready to go. But so that's my own personal update. On the Resilience Hub up in Haula, we did have a meeting yesterday with the architect from New York. And the design was selected. There were 2 options. We selected the design and he's about 75% done with designing the whole thing. My role on that project is focused around all the emergency management components, including the EOC and everything around that. So if you guys want more information on any updates happening there, just send me an email at mona_curry@yahoo.com and I will work with the community leader, Ms. Dottie, very proactive on everything, including funding. She's just moves mountains. I can get you the information that you need or, whatever questions you have on that particular project because as I understand it, and from what I've seen through my own interactions with other EOCs and resilience projects around the nation, it's a leading project. It's really going to be something special, a great resource that we're going to have on that side of the island.
Comments from? I know from the state side, we continue to get some questions on, and you used the term, I think, with the similar conversation with the Resiliency Hub discussion last time on just the word EOC. And we continue to struggle from the state perspective with the terminology being used, EOC, Resiliency Hub, specifically with CODEL, the congressional delegation, because there are some very influential stakeholders in the islands. And when projects like this come up, we've gotten the question of, is that EOC a backup state EOC? Is it a county EOC? Regrettably, in the last conversation, I had to say, no, it's not a state EOC. We have no agreement or plans to use that facility. All disasters start at the end of the local level, so I would defer to Hero. But I think as a group, and maybe a conversation for 2023 is when we use these terms, really do some cross-threading vertically and horizontally so that especially with some of these large business projects that we can be mutually supportive. I don't want to tell CODEL we don't support it, but because it's not a backup state EOC.
Right.
But I just put that out there. We've had a couple of conversations with
Okay.
CODEL since the last
Yeah.
meeting and want to support the project, but I can't classify it as a state EOC backup.
Yeah.
And again, I would defer to, I'm not sure, Hero, if you've had conversations.
Yeah, no, and it
formally.
wouldn't be a county EOC backup either, but do you know what funding source, Dottie's?
I have to leave that with you and Dundee. Yeah, it's just, because of my role with FEMA, a lot of it was brick. I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
I had to really stay away from that. But I can tell you a little bit more about the EOC that we're planning now. And if you want to have conversations about possible backup county EOC, we can certainly do that. But for now, we're planning for 10 seats. A couple liaison spots, mainly HPD and fire department. And certainly a liaison spot for county as well, if that's what you want. We're gonna have a sleeping area, a kitchen area, and separate bathrooms with showers. So that's kind of what the EOC is looking like now, but if conversation should be had about an alternate or backup for you, we need to have that now. just
Yeah, no, this is the
because of
first I'm hearing of it, and
design.
I don't think we had any intent of that. So I'm not trying to like insert myself into
No,
having a
I,
backup EOC there.
if I were you, I would really look at that as a resource for you, which is ultimately a resource for all of us. But it's something to consider. I don't know your backup, if you have one or two or three. Good to have two backups. If you just have one, if you have none, certainly can talk about that.
Okay, I'll follow up with Dottie.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and again, I think the CODEL conversation, because it involved FEMA mitigation brick funds and that terminology of a state or county EOC. I applaud the resiliency effort. I'd love to have a backup state EOC.
Right.
But the investment in some of the challenges that we've had with Berkheimer, there's an opportunity there, and anything that I can do or Hero can do to help sell it, I think that we're both,
Yeah.
we just want to be clear
Yeah.
that we don't say something to CODEL and say no, and then an application goes up, because that's kind of where this track is headed with this project, that if an EOC, we just want to be clear of maybe there's a different term that could be
It could
used.
be, we could call it community EOC. There's a emergency plan of the area, and a lot of it's based on that. That's how we came to the number of 10 seats.
Yeah.
So I can go back and review that and see if we had any other names in there that we did, but we can certainly talk about a name. You know. An EOC can be confusing to someone if, you know, they're coming in from another jurisdiction,
Yeah.
maybe providing mutual aid or something like that. It could be maybe misleading.
Yeah, anything that we can do offline, I think that would, just so we can better support in those conversations with Codel. That's my
That sounds good.
main focus.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question on that?
Yes.
When would you activate it? Or what would be the conditions under which you would activate this?
So I have to refer back to the plan. When the area becomes isolated or something happens that we feel like we're on our own, and I refer to myself as well because I live in that area. So if we feel isolated, roads, especially if Cam Highway, we're kind of trapped inside, or if an incident is just at a level where it seems like the area is going to need more help, or we really need more information, and there are different levels too, just like a regular EOC. You know, I think there's two levels. Kind of a dummied down, watered down version. Level one being you would activate at home. And level two, if that's not possible. So if we have to start going to backup, like ham radio or something like that, then we'll go in and start doing that.
What would be the chain of command from your satellite to the county or to the state?
Well, it's less chain of command. We defer everything to county for response. They're the ones who are technically the ones who are supposed to be the responders. The role of this particular EOC would be helping facilitate communication to county. What's happening here? It's really kind of, and then hoping to receive information back on what's being done to mitigate. So it's not like, let me back up. The resiliency hub is going to have a food pantry and ability to shelter. So we're going to be responding in that capacity, but as for clearing roads and bringing in more supplies and things like that, that would fall to the county, and we need to have really good, solid communication, which I think we would with the county on that kind of stuff. It's not like going to be hands-on out in the community, you know.
It just seems like it might muddle up the chain of command and how things get done. But you're now talking about this more as a communications hub, which makes more sense. So, yeah, maybe the term EOC is probably not the best one.
Yeah, community EOC. Yeah, but it's going to be the place where. So.
I think this goes back to the conversation summertime on the resiliency hubs. I know in other metropolitan areas, earthquake, there's a lot of, you know, the isolated communities and standing up the third point of interest. I think that the term, the resiliency hub term being used in the state, there's a lot of opportunity with this HAULA project to see how that fits in. And I think that just has to be walked through, because we would have a lot of questions from the state CEMP side, from the response and incident command structure. If a local entity has the resources and can stand up a structure like that, that's great. But I definitely don't want it to turn into, you know, the alternate city and county EOC if that's not the wishes of the city and county. So I think it's an opportunity, but I think it's one to kind of walk through as a case study and just be clear of what the roles are and what's not. It's kind of like I guess the best analogy is the pop-up shelter in a disaster that is not part of a city and county or municipality shelter system, you'll see faith-based groups stand up shelters in some municipalities. And they are done on their own outside of the normal operations. I think there's a much greater opportunity in them to formalize this so that it's clear, again, especially with the visibility. So.
But then again, those shelters that are kind of led by faith-based, even they do get support from local jurisdictions because it benefits the community to have that shelter. So the jurisdiction wants to support it, you know, make sure they're getting food if they need it, or, you know, assist with supplies or whatever. So it really is a partnership, you know, and Haula is, you know, very understanding that they could be isolated. Even been told, I guess, from county, maybe up to 3 days. That's where, you know, the planning should be for. Is that right?
I don't know where the 30 days came from. It might have been prior conversations, but I think certainly agree with Luke that I think we need to really like kind of come to agreement on some basic definitions. You know, maybe there's different models, right? And I think like Howell is so far ahead that we haven't like kind of caught up to you guys to figure out what this ought to look like. What is the relationship with government? Because we know that after something happens, the community is going to be involved.
You have
There
to
is
take
going to be
care
a
of yourself
response,
to a certain extent.
right?
I mean, that's what
And
makes you-
right. So I think you know, just going through those discussions and, you know, having common understanding of
Yeah.
what this is. And, you know, whether it includes some kind of USC-like component or if it includes a shelter component. I think these are the things that really like, these terminology have like funding implications that we need to really be clear on what they are.
Yeah, and the other thing is that later on down the road, you know, when the time comes, maybe we can enter into some sort of agreements, just so everyone has clear understanding
Agreeing.
So our farm
and know
community and on a paper,
about anything.
Mhm.
they wanted to use the term EOC and we
The
took.
shelters. how
So
do
I forget what
determine
came up,
what
like, you know,
ship- where
community
is going to be a shelter?
operations center or something they came up with.
And how do people know? Get there.
Gotta ask Gene.
How is the small community?
Determine,
Everybody knows
interact with
in
guys
terms of this hub.
and who
The
would
building site itself is going to have a lot of open space, which is a gym.
kind of thing is good. I
And also it's going to have classroom.
really in the details that you're gonna have.
Have partner agencies that are going to run programs out of there. There's also going to be a dialysis center. But the
Different in that,
gym,
like these
those are the places where shelter.
community boards and stuff, which we don't have.
idea on the sort of.
Yeah.
Additional comments or questions? A good conversation that we
Yeah.
need to, probably worthwhile to have a meeting with the city and county and HAEMA with Todd and you, just to kind of sit down and take this as an opportunity to align so that, again, we can be mutually supportive.
And people are going to be looking at it from all over the nation, you know, so the standards that we set are really going to be looked at. So maybe we can come up with some great things and sooner rather than later.
Let's move. Linda.
Oh, okay, well, and I'm pretty interested in this resilience center because we also have the same kinds of problems with the North Shore with Hanalei and Wainiha. And we are developing a resilience center there. Exactly how that's going to function is, I think, still up in the air, and how that's all going to, what the chain of command and everything is going to be up there. But part of the problem that we're having is that in the last couple of years, costs have gone up quite a bit. So when you're starting to develop something like this, or you're building something, you have these overruns, which are not really overruns because you didn't plan for it, but because you didn't anticipate how large that inflation is going to be. So that's kind of putting a little bit of a kink with our resilience center in Wainiha. But they're obviously, in the last 2018 floods, they were isolated for quite a bit of time. And so it becomes an important kind of thing to have there.
And I can tell you that one of FEMA's goals, I think I can speak now a little bit for FEMA since I don't work there anymore. They want to help isolated communities. That's a priority.
Well, see, that would be a question of what would be an isolated community, because from that perspective, all of Kauai might be an isolated community.
Yeah, yeah.
But I'll look into that.
Dottie really could probably give you more insight.
Okay. Well, this year has been pretty good to us. I guess I'm gonna knock on wood in terms of natural disasters. We haven't had any hurricanes of the Iniki strength or anything close to it. So that's been pretty good, although I may be speaking a little early because the hurricane season does continue on for a bit longer. But I'm going to think we've done pretty well this year. We're still doing some COVID testing around the island because we do have a lot of visitors at this point, I think more than we did in 2019. And that being the case, there are visitors are very interested in getting testing, especially when they have to go back home. The international, not students, the international visitors that we have, and they've got testing requirements. And I guess the last thing, and I'm going to leave a lot of this for Elton to talk about because Elton's much more, he's got a lot more detailed information on this, but I thought it was interesting, and we have talked about this for a while, that we don't have an emergency warning system on Ni'ihau, and that is going to be coming on. So, you know, in terms of an isolated community, you can't get more isolated than a tiny island away from another island. So it's one of those things that we're looking at here. And, you know, I think this was something that I'd really thought about until we heard about the Itaewon thing. We do have block parties on Kauai, and we have one on Rice Street. And I was very pleased to know that we are looking at doing an incident action plan and management plan, because even if we don't have, I think the concept of a crush is 7 people within a square yard, and then you have a problem with it. I don't think we'd ever have that problem on Rice Street. It's pretty wide, and we don't have that many people on Kauai. But I applaud them for doing the planning so that we are prepared for whatever might come up. And I think I'm going to leave it at that and let Elton talk about the rest of it.
Questions or comments, Brenda? You know that we continue through the things working with and on the alert for Ni'ihau. Constraints that we have with the siren investments that we make, but I know that we have made some progress and are actively working that. I'm not sure if Elton or Carlos have some information that can be shared with the group.
Oh, before I do that, just one more thing. There is one thing that we'd like to. I'm very grateful that we have had a partnership between HAEMA and KEMA for the anniversary of the Iniki. Documentation of that. That was very, very interesting, and something that we've learned a lot of lessons from, and a lot of our building codes and planning department codes are based upon the Iniki experience. So.
Yeah, very quickly. So, you know, HAEMA is the siren program lead, but I will, you know, thank Luke, Carlos, for your support. You know, we did a joint visit. KEMA was able to set up with the Robinson family to get HAEMA logistics branch people. I sent Chelsea from KEMA, Department of Education electrician, with the Robinsons on their private helicopter to go across and do a site assessment. And, you know, Carlos can see how that went. You know,
Was very pleased to see that the siren is in excellent condition. All the components work, and the last piece to the puzzle. I mean, the Navy went over and they have it on a hinge mounted so they can raise the siren when needed, and when not needed, they can bring it back to a horizontal position. The siren had very little rust. The components were all there. the missing pieces with DOE and getting the power generation piece to it. So there's some pieces that's coming. The anticipated with the supply chain issues, they were anticipating a early summer around May, June 2023. We did express that to Mr. Robinson. He was pleased with that timeline. There's some follow-up that's required between us and DOE just to make sure that we close that last technical mile. But I was very pleased with the status of the siren. It's there, it's operational. I mean, we're gonna do some testing and those last little pieces there, but that's the missing piece, and I'll do some follow-up with DOE just to get an update on that. We anticipate one more trip over just once those pieces come in to make sure the siren is fully operational. And then there was the potential to for some VIPs to go over there and meet with Mr. Robinson when we finally test this sound of siren.
Additional comments or questions for Glenda? Yeah, I think on the Aniki, I know that Hawaii several years ago did kind of an anniversary look back, and then working with Kima and Adam, External Affairs, with you all as partners over there, we think it's important. We haven't had, I gotta go back to later on this month now to Eva. We haven't had the directives here in 3 decades. So I think that some of the emotions and some of those, the storytelling that was done for those that watched those videos, it really kind of shows what can happen and larger resiliency that's needed after a storm like that on the island. So we appreciated that opportunity to share a little bit about and tie that into the larger preparedness message for hurricanes or the larger set of hazards we're faced with. So
Yeah, I think it would be interesting to see how that compares to how Fort Myers in Florida is going to be doing all of their rebuilding and what kinds of experiences they have based upon 30 years of experience before in Iki.
yeah, between Andrew and Charlie and now Ian, David talked a little bit about building codes. Between Aniki and Andrew, Florida and Hawaii have taken different trajectories on building codes. I think that some of the things on the North Shore, Kauai with elevating homes is very strong mitigation wise. We've been beat up by FEMA nationally in the BRIC program and the pre-disaster mitigation program, and even flood mitigation assistance, because our building codes out here and that process, they lag. When the standard is in Fort Myers for 150-mile-per-hour wind and most of the building stock is built to that, besides the storm surge, many of those structures, they lost some elements, but structurally they were sound. We do not have that level of building code here. Even our modern code that we are building to is not to that level for residential property. And I think the elevations, again, on the North Shore of Kauai are a good example, but I think the larger building codes in the state need to be looked at. Unless we have a storm, I think it's going to be hard to build on that. But
I think the planning department on Kauai is already looking at that and elevating it. I don't think you can mandate that, but I think it can be highly recommended. And it's a proposal right now before the council and for the planning department.
Difference in Hawaii and Florida is not just because it's just about every aspect of management. About the same. And the other piece of the code is uniform throughout the state. Much structure. Have a bare minimum. No county that have much more section. Their building code and the way they established it was so well done that now they have excess shelter space because the majority of the art inundation zones don't have, which also helps with evacuation and things like that. Big difference. It's a good step.
Some of the recent efforts, at the applaud, Kauai with the sea level rise. I wish we had the same emphasis on building that we do right now. With sea level rise. And I think elevations Kauai is leader, when it flood hazard, any type of inundation hazard, but larger, building code adoption. I think that it's a priority for 2023 and beyond. And if anything that we can do to help promote those building codes moving forward is, as a group, we really need to push on the rest of the state for that. So additional comments or questions for Glenda? Yes, sir.
I could probably turn to Daryl and ask the question, but as you go down Colonial Avenue in Keaukaha, some of those homes has been elevated. Was that voluntary or was that county request or code?
Cool.
Oh, really? That's good. news.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of them are open.
Yeah. That's good news. That's all I had.
Additional comments or questions?
Just so it's can be agendized for the future, but I know that in the last state building code council meeting, Taima did a nice presentation about the brick funding that could help the state building code council, because I'm not sure if everybody understands, the state building code council is a governor appointed body that adopts the building codes. But a lot of those participants wear other hats. So they're managing their own building divisions as well as trying to help adopt the codes. So to your point, we may not have the strictest of codes or the most resilient of codes. And part of it is because it's being put together by an organization that doesn't have administrative staff, doesn't have funding, could benefit from that. And I think with the partnership that was offered with the brick funding, that'll be an injection of support for the building code council to get it done.
Yeah, we agree that, I think with the emphasis not only here, but across the country under the brick program for the current pot, FEMA has opened up the types of projects where you can do technical assistance with building code partners. And so in partnership with the State Building Code Council, HACEM was going to do that. Kauai specifically is also looking. We're losing about 20 to 25% of our scores in the brick application process just because of building codes. And how we're using backdated building codes. So we're at a serious disadvantage. So leveraging some of the brick technical assistance projects is something with the SBCC. We hope to have a couple of projects that will help with that. And that there are some other legislative opportunities too. So. Additional comments or questions for the HACEM members?
Very quickly, I mean, this isn't my area of expertise, but a little bit of a discussion that I've heard related to the building codes, especially when, David Kennett was trying to spearhead the B6 rating and all. Politically, there's quite a bit of opposition where cost to industry and people trying to do the building projects would increase. And I don't know how we would address that. That's above our pay grade, but not yours.
No. The resilience team, Lorinda,
Yeah.
we did have, there's a separate rating agency that does look at the B6, and Hawaii is one of the few remaining states that doesn't use that agency. And so you start to cut across a lot of how we do business, and cost is brought up. There are a number of different things. There are some examples of similar types of rating bureaus that similar to Hawaii, that also score high. So we do believe there's an opportunity to influence that from a resiliency perspective. But it's, as we told members of the CODEL, this is not an overnight.
Mm.
But the same projects that are going to be submitted project-wise in the next round of BRIC are going to be at the same disadvantage because of our building code and our B6 ratings. So it's probably like 2 years out that we could influence that so that when those applications go in, besides technical assistance, so. It's just, yeah, it's a much larger conversation of how those building codes are implemented, so.
David, can I add one?
Yes, ma'am.
So I forgot to mention that the Department of Energy did give Howla a grant to get TA for the energy component.
Oh,
So we've been meeting with the DOE to talk about being off the grid and supplying energy back to community members if power is down, that kind of thing. And then the other end result would be to be able to come up with a facility and an energy plan that would help with getting other grants. So that's kind of a huge thing to get that TA grant from DOE.
are you working with the Hawaii State Energy Office too?
I believe they're involved in the conversation, yes.
We do have emergency management officers. If you're not, we can provide John Chin as our point of contact with Scott, who oversees the energy office. So if there's any connections you need there, we can
Okay.
help
I'll
facilitate.
double check on that.
Additional comments or questions from the HACEM members or for the HACEM members? And we want to use this opportunity for you all to share and to bring up ideas and thoughts that we can kind of help move the needle. So really appreciate that. There's a number of items I think we need to follow back up on and continue that dialogue. Okay, next on the agenda, we're going to move to county EM partner reports. We do not have Talmadge here today. He's, with Mauna Loa. Norman was en route. Don't think he made it. So boom to Mr. Hero.
Okay, so actually, I think this topic that I want to introduce to this council ties in with some of the conversations that we've been having about building codes, shelters, and other things. Jerry, we talked a little bit about the home retrofits and things like that. But one component that we've been focusing on at the City and County of Honolulu is our existing formerly called shelter space. Lauren, I know you're going to talk a little bit about the retrofit part of it, but we're having to deal with here and now. What would we do today if something were to happen? We can talk about upgrading building codes. We can talk about home retrofits and retrofitting shelters, but the reality is we have what we have today and we got to make the best use of them. So in 2020, we actually used some of the CARES Act funding for COVID response to introduce a new assessment process that we've been calling the best available refuge area, BARA for short. And this is actually taking a methodology that was developed by FEMA for tornado-prone areas and also for Puerto Rico. In having a little bit faster and cost-effective assessment process for existing buildings to see which ones of those would rate the best, fare the best in high wind conditions. So we work with a company called Atkins, and they're the ones that work with FEMA to develop this methodology. And they adopted a new methodology for Hawaii. And so we use this to assess something on the order of 200 buildings. And the idea was that during COVID, we need to identify more space because we need to be able to social distance between the evacuees. But the problem was we didn't have a good grasp on which of the facilities were to go. So this has a long history that David's probably intimately familiar with. It's had some evolution over the years. The last real series of assessments that was done was like around year 2000. And there hasn't been a whole lot of like systemic assessments done since then. And so, back up until, 2019, 2020, we had a huge list of potential shelter facilities, like 140 or something for Oahu that we were considering as potential hurricane shelter space. Problem was we didn't actually know how good these facilities were. So what we did was selected the ones that we thought had a pretty good chance of being able to serve as a shelter, and also for ones for which we had records from HAIMA on having done retrofits, and prioritized those facilities for assessments. And we came back, and unfortunately, a lot of buildings that we thought we could use were ruled out. The engineer said, you know what, we do not recommend using these buildings. So while our total inventory went down, it was actually good to know which ones we shouldn't use. So so that was only a partial solution, and we're actually still continuing to, as funding becomes available, do more assessments, buildings that we didn't look at before, buildings that we didn't think was good to go before. But the other part of this is that we're trying to do now is those assessments didn't actually include any kind of recommendations from the engineers in terms of mitigation measures that can be taken as kind of quick hits. Okay, like if only you cover the windows, this facility would be okay to use. So what we're trying to do is go in for another round of funding through the ARPA Fiscal Relief Fund to do more assessments, and also actually to kind of modify the methodology a little bit to include recommendations for kind of quick hit mitigation and retrofits that we could do to the facilities. So we believe this is something that we needed to do just in terms of having a good understanding of the facilities that we're going to use, right? Like to have some level of confidence that the facilities that we select are going to are more likely to survive wind impacts. We can't make any guarantees, but we also want to do this in a cost-effective way, because I think the standards that went into effect after 2004 was it included structural engineering assessments that came out to like $15,000 a pop, which really was cost prohibitive to do on a wide scale. So this methodology, it's still kind of expensive, but it's like $3,000 per assessment that we have. So so in the next year or so, we're trying to continue this effort, assess more facilities, that ones we haven't checked. Right now we have gaps on, Lorinda knows this, like the North Shore of Oahu, for instance, doesn't have any facilities identified. If you're in like, Haleiwa or, Sunset, then closest one you'd have might be as far as like Wahiawa, right? Same thing like within Kailua town, or in Kailua, there are no facilities. Leeward side, there's also some it's pretty sparse. And of course, like along the Windward Coast, that's just, there's limitation in numbers of facilities that are available, period. So there's really not even any buildings for us to assess. But, I think what we're doing is that we're just trying to deal with the reality we have today. And if we were to have an emergency, what are the best facilities we could use, and to have a pretty good understanding of what those are. So so as we continue this effort, be more than happy to share this with the other counties. I know we did some briefings for you guys a little while back. Be more than happy to revisit and introduce this concept. And just I'd like to see this kind of become the overall part of the overall strategy. It's like we need to have like long-term, new buildings that are going to be built, public buildings. Yeah, they need to be eligible as shelters. We need to do retrofits, but what do we do in the short term, right? So so that's basically what I wanted to share with you guys today. So hopefully within the next 12 months, we have another round of funding to go in for additional assessments. The other part that we're trying to do is part of the reason why I'm talking about this today is a little bit of a selfish motive. We have a hard time explaining this concept to the public. So I'm trying to get more reps in explaining this to other people. So hopefully what I relayed to you made some sense. And another component of the project that we're going to do in the next 12 months is this sort of public information component to this. It's like, okay, what is this best available refuge area? How does it compare to, like, maybe do something like how the Weather Channel does it, right? They're like really good at those simulations. They kind of this augmented reality type thing where they have like, okay, this is the category 1 hurricane. This is what storm surge looks like, 6 feet or whatever. So we'll try to do something kind of that's easy to consume and captures people's attention, and can explain this a little bit better. So that's it for me.
Yeah, make a few comments. I think one thing that's really important to look at is, like, if you look at Florida went down this retrofit and these types of different like, refuge areas. And the problem, one of the big problems is looking at this is it's a single line. It's a single line solution. What we need is multiple lines for the solution. We're already far behind the amount of shelters we would most likely need, and in with poor housing and other building stock. And what starts happening is you can invest another $3,000 to go out and look at each building and everything. But when it's time to retrofit or it's time to upgrade, you spend $15,000 again on an assessment to do this. And so you start getting into these, when you look at the overall retrofit, you start laying on steps of money that you're investing in a building. So like one of the things we went back and did with our retrofit program is we created, based on dates and building codes, and said anything below that is not going to be viable. So you can eliminate it for a pretty inexpensive way to go forth, just based on things like that on existing knowing. But that's not the end of it, because it takes a long time and it's very expensive to do the retrofitting. And so you have to incorporate this with means of keeping people in their homes, as well as improving the stock as we go forward. Because even with what you're talking about here, which I totally agree, we need interim solutions. But if an interim solution is going to delay the far off solution, we're still going to be in the same boat 10 years from now. We're not going to make any gains. And that's what I'm saying, the difference between the way Florida thought and we thought. They did multi-pronged approach to doing this stuff. Now from Iniki to Andrew, which happened the same year, to now Florida has extra space. They keep their people in their homes if they're not in inundation zones. And that reduces shelter, reduces the overall care. Right. Programmatic, and I think that's one of the biggest things that we failed to do in the state is look at these things in programmatic or systematic terms and see how things connect to overall help us. Because like with the retrofit program from when we went through from 2005 to 2015 is, yes, you can say, well, we can put shutters on this thing and it's going to be a little better, but it doesn't increase the strength of the building. And that's what they did before. We want, for us in the state and our retrofit money, we want to stay away from that, because that's one of the reasons why we did not get the amount of hardened buildings at the end of 10 or 15 years of retrofitting. Had a lot of work done, but we didn't get it, or the amount of hardened buildings. And it leaves us in this precarious position. So I think that's one of the major things. And when we go back and start saying, okay, how do we really improve our sheltering, is that we have to look at keeping people in their homes. We have to improve the stock, and we have to look at improving the buildings from inception, because then you get a stronger building, you get more space, and at a cheaper cost. So that might mean like saying a certain public building, a certain percentage of it is done to a hardened structure so it can be used as shelter, not maybe necessarily the whole building, but a piece of that, so throw that out to keep in the back of people's minds to help try to develop this out better. If not, we'll have all these interim solutions, but not make a real dent in the actual numbers. To give you an idea what those numbers were, years ago when we finished the assessment, we continued at about $3 million every other year. And we looked at the estimated amount of people that would require that type of sheltering. At that time was about 30% of the population. It would take us 300 years to. So, in the past, they only use schools. The average DOE is 65 years old. We're not the best thing to use. Shelter, right? So we, and that's another thing we did. We opened up ours to other than schools, and other buildings could be eligible so that we can increase that shelter space. And those are some of the things from the past that we feel that mistakes were made and don't want to repeat those, because they're very costly.
So then the question becomes, when you did all this assessment and they said these buildings were not appropriate, or that there were problems with it, what were the prevalent problems? Was it mostly windows?
That I don't know. Yeah, because it's a, you know, they look at all kinds of components, so,
And the envelope, it depends on too, when the building was built. So that had a lot to do with it. So if you, the material used, the way the construction was. Done. Also too, on the older buildings, the span, beam span, the span of the roof. Because again, materials. So depending on when that, like if you had a building that might have this extended beam for the roof, if it was built in 1965, it probably wouldn't hold. But today, modern built material, it would probably be fine. So those are the type of things. Windows, doors is another one. Other pieces of it are like emergency power hookup, water and sewage. Where's that located in bathroom space and things like that located within, you know, this shelter. And then of course the whole envelope of the thing. So they would look at all of those things. And then in a normal engineering report, then you get basically a small pamphlet back, and it will tell you what it takes to bring this building up to a type A, a type B, or EF building. But it's costly.
Oh, yeah.
Like you said, he's right on with the 15,000 per building.
But I think that, you know, Hero's point in this larger conversation that HACEM and the counties are looking at sheltering capacity in the state. Unless we're getting tens of millions of dollars or we get creative investments, those are decadal investments that from a CIP. So even if we were given $100 million and we could retrofit X buildings, that's 5 to 10 years from now that we're going to have a building that can handle. So, you know, you have to applaud the city and county for the massive population exposure on Oahu sizing this up, because sooner or later the Iniki or Eva or something is going to happen and a lot of people are going to be displaced. And, you know, you have the first storm that either they survived or they're sheltering, and then you're still in hurricane season. So there has to be a larger look at this, but there has to be a larger investment. And the current investment that the state has been making, just at least from the HACEM side, hasn't been able to keep up. So additional comments or questions for Hero?
I do. I have two. So just like a general ballpark figure with the current inventory of facilities that are identified as being able to withstand the winds.
Mhm.
What's like the number that you can shelter?
at
Right
10
now.
square feet per person, it's about 100,000 people.
So right now we have an inventory of 100,000 people sheltered.
If we cram people in standing room only, kind of.
And then, so let's just say they survive, they're not sheltered appropriately. Their buildings are not, you know, they can't go back in them. Do we have in the county like a non-traditional sheltering plan for sheltering outdoors?
Oh, post-impact. Okay, yeah, so this is something HACEM has been working on too, but you know, for us, we would assess the buildings that are in our inventory, primarily parks and recs locations, which are not rated to be hurricane shelters, so they have a less likelihood of having survived the storm, and that's why we don't put people there pre-impact, right? But let's just say some of these survive, then those would be the facilities that we would go to. We do want to return the schools back to the DOE as early as possible to allow for school to resume, because that's a really important part of the recovery process. So, you know, we would have to look at least temporary sheltering solution. And, you know, before we go back into housing reconstruction, that's going to take a long time too, right? So there's potentially other solutions in between that we have to pursue. So I think that was HACEM's intent with the wiki shelters that you guys did, right?
And then and through all of this, where does the American Red Cross come in?
So pre-impact, just to be frank, you know, they have limitations in their resources on island, and also they try to bring in folks from the mainland too, but there's also limitations in that, right? So Pre-impact sheltering, we actually, at least for Oahu, we plan on, we train and organize our city employees to go function at the
Oh,
pre-impact
good.
shelters.
Okay.
It's more likely that Red Cross can bring in a lot more resources post-impact, assuming, logistically it's feasible for them to do that. So they'd certainly be part of that support for that kind of congregate sheltering operations that we would have to do after the evacuation sheltering phase is over.
Why do shelters have to be government built?
They don't.
I get back to those 320 high rises. They're not all that great. Some are probably like was it collapsed in Florida, but they're probably better single wall house that people are in right now.
Yeah, and I think something we haven't pursued yet is looking at workplaces as potential shelters. We have plenty of strong concrete buildings that are functioning as offices or workplaces. So I think that's just something we haven't had source to pursue, but not something that's been kind of in our mind. So.
I think that one last comment, government buildings are usually targeted, they're easier to work with. It's easier to get in, easier for a bunch of different reasons, but when you start working directly, you start working with businesses, it becomes a little.
You'll see this is tier 6, I think.
Enter into MOUs and like quicker and easier and faster. It shouldn't be the only resource.
So at this point in time, we're just going to take a 2-minute break as part of the continuous improvement opportunities in HACEM. We've been tied to the siren and the monthly test. HACEM has initiated radio tests with our leadership that have radios, and it just happened to fall during the HACEM meeting. So
Cool.
we're going to do a strategic pause, and we're going to start lunch, and then we're going to do a working lunch and continue. So Kelly, we'd like to go ahead and serve lunch, and then we'll pick back up with some more questions from heroes. So the radio test should be over in about 2 minutes. So that's trying to turn the needle here. So.
How come you're 6 and not 1?
I used to be. Horror was one.
So are we in a 2-minute break?
You should be.
I'm gonna run to the restroom then.
Tag was Commander 1A, and I was Commander 2A, but I became Sierra 6. Yes, sir. Don't need a lot. Sure. You can graze if you want to. Nope, I'm okay. Are they just announce what's there, and we can serve or pick up, however.
So you know what's going on with the Rick Fund?
Okay, everyone, this is box lunches from Big City Diner.
That was mine.
The project's not even.
There's 5 that are set aside that are vegetarian.
Yeah, man.
The other has 2 proteins in them. And your
That was like.
silverware, I think there's a cookie. And it has a
Letter
drink.
saying it was an alternate.
Okay, so you help yourself.
I said, so we chose.
For how?
They're using this in play. How was that?
And run no BCR. Fighting, get into the patient.
Oh, then going all day, but it's sake. One.
The weird, stupid, like funding mechanism
Yeah.
they use, right?
Right.
It's like it's congressionally directed, but it comes through like FEMA's grant program.
Right, and so the Codell money is old EOC grant,
Yeah.
which again, I say it's EOC. Fine.
Good to go.
It's this ass backwards thing where they
Thank you.
allocate the funding and then they do that was just.
So right now, we got $1 million of the state EOC grant from.
So.
FEMA's at, it's for the next phase.
Chicken.
So doing preliminary schematics, it would be like get us to like 5% design.
Sorry.
So the FEMA's on back and forth, right?
Gas portion. Local stationers that are signal.
So they're gonna run into this.
I was thinking
They
like.
just, without that filtering, a year from now, got the money.
So
Now we're gonna.
that's the only complaint. No.
So I think it's out of you and I and.
Yeah.
Yeah, we
Maybe.
actually could.
No,
I
now
I just, I think somebody who can like speak authority.
We just want everyone.
Yes.
to
Okay, so this is to be completed by the
Oh,
Tuesday,
man.
but it would be, yeah, this part.
I think
So
they've been
just
getting
this
kind
part,
of
but you,
CBC answers.
first,
I'm sure more
and
affidavit.
and then I'll
When
just,
it's quick on the trigger.
but up to them.
So
to
even if
start
we
working,
eligible,
So we need to
actually,
figure
there's a bunch of people trying to do it as well.
and up to-
Yeah.
Correct. Oh, yeah, they're stretching.
Yeah.
So glasses are.
Either way,
It does though, man. I've been watching, like, been DVRing some shows and they come through those alerts.
Yeah, saying that it.
Man, it's a,
KIKU.
Yeah.
Actually, you know, use it.
so
like,
it will make you miss parts of a show. And then it's something you DVR, it really don't matter.
not just the match, but mine too.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
So,
but I'm not sure who they're going to. No, but if design and, yes, it just the design and engineering.
I don't know if you've been watching, but we, doing constructions, you know, so it's about modular.
that's why, like, I don't think focus even for.
Yeah.
Is,
Next, you know.
and so she's banking on this for some.
Right.
It's amazing.
Like, if it isn't, like, I'm sure she's gonna go after some other money.
In the hospital.
So, yeah,
Get it
I'm
done.
in favor of the meeting, They and I, and Mona, just.
Alright. But yeah, it's-
Because it just has caught us off guard. They asked for the,
So,
like, right.
Everything from the rapture.
Yeah.
To.
I forget.
Like, but I did a presentation up and they bid on a project that's hospital. So they would.
So Kelly, are there
Design.
over here. Yeah. I didn't come.
So that whether it was a,
Vegetarian.
let's say,
Yeah.
this is team off.
Definitely.
Yeah, no, and we,
Nation's private. The same, you just change.
I think like what we're doing, like,
Basically, how I based.
And they're fixing the collect.
Absolutely.
This is something.
The only bit to think is,
And also like trying not to expensive.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Does House know how to
You're able to
showed him.
produce
Sure.
and then they
Uh,
to deliver quicker.
It's intimidating for, I think.
No, yeah, well, it is. I've never used one. Because as soon as you press the button and you jam it. Oh, but this is good though. It's good.
Yeah.
Pretty sure I had that thing
I
forever.
moved this model, so I went from one apartment to another.
Oh. Okay.
Critical procedures. Went back.
And you got the alert sense stuff, okay? So it comes down around three mediums, email, phone, and text. Probably need to start checking like the staff.
Oh, well, you know,
One of the,
I know, you guys are.
yes, yeah, now that we've done this twice, we need to report out. The other thing that, you know, Matthew and I were talking about, this goes back to alert send.
To go back on.
We may have to pay more, but you know, you can do two-way texting. So my question is, are we paying? Or we need to put it on? If not, then we should,
oh, yeah.
because
He shoot for like another segment.
it's gonna bump it.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I don't mind because I would rather respond to you by text real fast and say, I'm okay.
We're gonna see you in.
I hope it. My fear is
You wore the same.
they should get the call, right? Like if it's their personal phone, if everybody doesn't have it. So if it's my personal phone, then I'm not getting the confirmation via the email.
Oh, yeah, you, and the phone though, even on the phone like just now, if I didn't press one, I can't validate it once it goes to voicemail.
Right.
So you have no accountability of me
Yeah.
by personal phone or.
So that's why we need to
Yeah.
definitely turn it on the text, because again.
Yeah.
The only way if you miss the call, then that's it. There's no confirmation piece.
We should ask alert sense of, one, is it, if it is, can we turn it on? If not, then what's the cost?
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. She does come in these waves where she plus like every. No,
You go,
Oh, yeah.
Your friendly neighbor.
Even Helen's got one?
Does she call you?
Nah.
Not anymore. Yeah, we haven't doing a good job keeping her apprised.
I guess this takes precedence over that.
We're ready to talk about that. Yeah, sure.
Have the staff bring it down.
This is one of the students. Just returned.
I gotta do my blood test. I'm like trying to get.
You have a copy of the tape for the unique nomination?
I think I might have a web link, perhaps. I don't have a copy of the tape. But Adam Weintraub,
Mhm.
he's the lead. Yes, I think you would probably have be able to give us
You
a.
might want to get a copy for the county,
For what?
for the county.
Yeah, they're special that they did, yeah.
Right up there.
And,
Where's
Oh, my.
tire and just kick back?
Same companies.
Hartman was asking this.
And I'm thinking,
Want him to jump on?
what buzzword? Most of them. Nothing.
He did let me do it.
Me?
Yeah.
Kelly this morning?
So
Oh,
that's what I was like.
yeah.
missile logistics.
Herman was asking this morning if there was a virtual option. And I told him, I was like, hey,
It's like,
doesn't
oh,
start till
it's
11,
like,
so you
where
might
is he?
still make it.
So for our working lunch today, as I was saying before the radios went off, AIMA is part of continuous improvement tied to the monthly siren test. Each of the AIMA team members gets a alert warning notification through AlertSense, which is our internal notification platform. And they get lit up on their personal phone, and if they have a work mobile phone, and email and text, and then we ask them for accountability purpose to respond. We have had some challenges in the last year with what has been called the HACEM no notice recall. And so we have taken kind of progressive measures with various levels of the organization to test alert and warning and then just being able to notify people. So based on the recommendations from ops and logistics, siren test, and we do WIA once a month, it kind of fits nicely. So we can make team members more comfortable with radios or just getting a call at 2 o'clock in the morning to start a potential recall process. So apologize that you had to experience that as part of the HACEM meeting, but it's a small step, but a big one for how you do some of this.
For the individuals who want to get notified, is that an opt-in or an opt-out program here?
Or is there an option?
Or is
That's
it
what
an
it-
option?
So I think. they-
So as a HACEM employee, you sign on to this organization and you have a responsibility to report. You do not have to provide a personal number, like a mobile number, but we do ask for an after-hours contact.
I'm sorry, that was not intended for HIEMA. It was intended for the general public.
Yeah, so we don't use AlertSense that way. Each of the counties, they do have their
Okay.
HNL. Elton has his.
Right.
So we have referred to the counties for their specific alert warning. AlertSense does have a larger tie into the reverse 911 that we send out statewide. But we don't ask individuals to sign up for ours. We put that feature off.
Right.
There are pros and cons of that, because in a big disaster, we would want to be able to back them up potentially. But there's a whole kind of marketing campaign on this. is a bit challenging. So.
Mhm.
Andre, you go.
Sorry, I was gonna come up. Thanks for.
Thank you.
So kind of just open it back up. Thing I was going to say to David about Heroes Report. We have had a longer term conversation about trying to make shelter capacity in the state, which goes back to several decades of shelter retrofitting money and go sheltering. Those are long-term investments. With FEMA, we have had a multi-year effort of developing a health and operational support plan. So that kind of goes from, my house is broken and I need to go to a shelter, which we would work with counties on from that capacity, to what types of federal assistance that may be available. You always see, and you saw it with Ian, the blue tarps that FEMA sends out, not the Home Depot grade tarps. They are thick blue tarps. So you can, the state can take on the responsibility and or share costs with the counties to bring in the blue tarp brigade after a big storm, to a temporary shelter assistance where we could put you up in a hotel, either here, let's say if it's on Oahu or on a neighbor island, or geofence it to send Hawaii residents to a West Coast place. This actually was used in the Lava 2018 incident. And then that kind of gets into some of the things the hero was mentioning on, well, when does Luke rebuild his home? That starts to get to permitting and things at the county level. So it's definitely a multi-pronged approach. It's going to take a lot of different efforts. There's the FARA assessment stuff that the county is doing, or some of these are larger state programs. So we have done some investments. I think we've made put FEMA at a little more at ease, just establishing some of these programs. But just have a lot of buildings and for big hurt. That gets into a larger section. Additional comments or questions as you chow down or Hero's comments or questions for the county? Lorinda?
I was gonna just continue on with what I was talking about. So FEMA does have a lot of these post-disaster housing programs, which are very attractive. But as we've talked to each of the counties, there is a cost share that the county will have to bear. And one of the things that scares me about the transitional housing program, which puts them into hotels, is and FEMA tells me that we can monitor the dollar amount, but you need to know how much this is going to cost you. Because at some point you may tell me, stop it already because it's just too expensive. And FEMA has also shared that sometimes it's difficult to get them out of the hotels because it's nicer than what they're going to go to. So none of these options are perfect, but at least they're options for us. And as it happens, we will talk to you folks and consult with you, and you folks determine what is the best action for your county.
We have put on some of the housing programs in our documentation that the state may be willing to pick up the 25% match or split the match. But, we had situations in COVID where, emergency protective options started at $100 million. The state was on the hook for 25 million in a normal disaster. So a large scale hurricane or tsunami incident, and you displace tens of thousands of people. Just looking at some of the numbers from Ian, I saw the 1.67 billion in debris costs. It's already been, it just, the match, if it is 25%, 10%, challenge to stake.
Yeah, the other thing that what Luke is talking about is we would ask that the county put this money aside with the estimate of how much their cost share is. And then we won't be able to tell you when the bills. It could come next year, it could come 2 years from now, it could come 4 years from now. But you gotta have the money when it comes through. And that's what we're facing, that we're getting bills now of 2018. So, you know, if the bill is coming, it's
Yeah, to Lorena's point, the 2018 lava flow, it's Logan as tag and Administrator Travis signed off on a lot of direct federal assistance, and there was 5% match for the lava incident. Just got the bill 18 for the 25% share for the lava incident in April. About almost $700,000 of. So not only do you have to, there are a number of challenges that the larger these incidents are, the state and the counties are just going to have to be able to make some of those payments, not necessarily in the current fiscal year, but potentially 2 or 3, 4 years down.
Did you have funds appropriate?
It should have been the major disaster fund. There are some questions of how that budget and finance has kind of a strict definition of you have to have an emergency proclamation and it has to be federal assistance, which we met it, but they're a bit hung up on that it's outside of the state fiscal. So that, yeah. So this has been bumped up to the director to talk about, but AG's office, and Mike's not here to talk about this, but the answer is to ask next legislative session for an emergency appropriation to pay that. But the case study, start talking about tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for the cost share. Yeah, so.
Yeah, and I think it's coming at a time when revenues are down for everybody, right? Especially for counties, for property taxes. Bunch of homes destroyed, then folks are gonna be exempt from paying their money to.
And I think the other amendment to 127-816, which is the major disaster fund. There's a very prescriptive disaster reporting requirement now, major disaster fund and all federal assistance, in light of the $1.6 billion of COVID funds that came through. Very little of that went to HACEM, that went to the governor's office. So the ledge saw that all this money came into the state and the executive had a lot of control over that, and the counties did. Technically, that's all disaster assistance, but it's for a extreme asterisk event. All types of federal funds that come through that would never be without them. So
Are there going to be any disaster funds or FEMA involvement in the Red Hill water?
no FEMA funding. We know there are other EPA and
Right.
There have been other federal fund and services that have been coming through, but nothing through the traditional Stafford Act.
Okay.
Not have a county emergency proclamation or a state emergency proclamation to consider that. Additional comments or questions on here with regard to the sheltering capacity? All right, we'll transition on to Elton for an update for.
I refrain from doing additional comments on what Hiro said, but what I'm going to start off with actually has some relation to what Hiro talked about. County of Kauai, State of Hawaii, on our island, have had a long-standing relationship with the Department of Defense IRT, or Innovative Readiness Training Program. And every so many years, they've done operation or exercise called Tropic Care, where they bring in humanitarian assistance. So it's like medical, dental, and vision services. And they're practicing for like overseas deployments, but they do it on Kauai and they provide free services for our community. As a result of the most recent Tropic Care, David Kennard, who used to work for Luke, but now works for Kima, was at the Aloha Luau with his wife, Dr. Berman, and they started talking. And long story short, Kima, County of Kauai, is partnering with IRT, and we are closing the deal right now on having them provide military emergency managers to help us do a CEMP EOP rewrite, free of charge to the county. Related to what Hiro was talking about, they have engineering capability, so they are going to be working with us to do structural assessments of our designated shelter facilities. In addition, we've got some of Hiro's BARA information or specs, and we can do BARA assessments as well, because we know that many won't meet an engineering standard. So that's very exciting for us. And, I heard, there's a challenge in getting those assessments funded, but if we prove to be this proves to be a model that works, then perhaps other jurisdictions can reach out in Hawaii, because believe me, they want to come here rather than deploy elsewhere. So it's an opportunity for other jurisdictions. They even went as far as to say that it's possible, because they do have a construction capability. It's possible that they could do retrofits themselves, although they're not going to retrofit a whole number. It'll be like one project at a time. So, we'll try to pave the way with these guys and think it's going to work. They're very excited about the CEMP part, and then, we'll see from there. Glenna had reported on a few things. I want to just add a couple more items that are kind of might be interesting. The FirstNet, public safety broadband cell network, so to speak. Kauai had originally been slated to not get a satellite cell on wheels, or a SAT-COW unit, but we were informed to our surprise, and we were very pleased that AT&T did deploy a SAT-COW to Kauai, and they have a trained technician, and they have told us that at no cost to county, we can request deployment of the asset. So early next month, no, this month now, we will be doing a demo up in Kokee, where we don't have a cellular service, and we'll have police, fire, whatever first responder partners, EMS up there, and they'll demonstrate the capability of the SAT-COW. So that'll be a game changer for us. Other things we've been doing, the Flood Recovery Act 12, 35-9, our contractor for the North Shore subgrants, mitigation subgrants, was selected, Halehalawai, and they in turn are preparing their RFP to do sub-awards to community-based nonprofits. So it's in the neighborhood of 7.285 million. So people will get to do a lot of good out there on the North Shore and other affected communities like Anahola. I do want to thank Luke and Haima partners for working with us and FEMA on some of our hazard mitigation grant program initiatives, like our phase 1 of hardening of the War Memorial Convention Hall, and then what we're trying to do for Hanalei Hill, where the entire hillside came down. We're trying to get the alternate emergency access route on an old easement with the power company through the National Wildlife Refuge, and that looks like it's coming along pretty good. And good partnership on that. Uh, Back we had HAIMA and FEMA mitigation folks come out and do a site visit a few months ago. That was that was good to do. Let me see what else I have in my list of things here. We continue our work on the trying to do our levee rehabilitation, but quite honestly, there's some legal debate going on right now about the Corps taking the position that because they originally constructed the levees, they shouldn't be touching them again. But the clause that they were able to show us doesn't hold water for our county attorney and an attorney from Schatz's office who has been taking great interest in the case. So we'll see. I don't want to go to get in conflict with the Army Corps, but hopefully we have a path forward that way. Otherwise, alternative would be to manage it ourselves without much Corps involvement. We had hoped to partner with the Corps and have them PM it for us, and we provide. And in fact, they have a hefty chunk of our funding for the past over a year that was transferred to them, and they were going to start, and then they halted. So we shall see how that goes. I think those are the main highlights. Other than last thing I'll end with is Kima, we are hiring. So we have a new accountant position that was approved by the administration and the county council. So dedicated fiscal position. And then we'll be attempting to fill a staff officer / staff specialist position. So one of our employees who originally was from the Big Island worked for us for a couple of years and decided he wanted to live in Hilo. So he went back. That's it. So that's my update.
Questions or comments for Elton? Go ahead, sir.
Just, congratulations, the work you guys did on this project.
Uh-huh.
National award, regional.
Mhm.
Engineering award.
I knew that was the present project. To get national recognition is nice too.
Yeah. Credit to HAIMA and Wilcox Foundation and FEMA. So.
Actually, the award was nominated by the contractor. He's very proud of it.
So I'll tell you folks, even the IRT folks, Innovative Readiness Training, and the people from the Army Corps, because they do electrical assessments and stuff, they're all asking us, they want to see the generator. So when they come, David Kennard's going to be making arrangements with Wilcox for tours. And you folks are welcome, those who didn't come. I know Luke's been there, but it's 3 state-of-the-art generators. Extremely redundant backup for the hospital.
Progress, yeah, saying the old generator.
Yep. So the old generators were donated to the county of Kauai, and we'll be using them for, I believe, wastewater backup. And yeah, I think that's what their intent is. So Public Works got them. I wanted them to be a backup to our backup, but they said it's too big for our facility. So, yeah.
So I do want to mention that Wilcox Hospital is such a landmark project that we just recently made a presentation to the Healthcare Association of Hawaii, talking about the Wilcox project, and talking to them about future projects that we could do the hospitals, and they're along the same vein to make them more resilient. And it's the first time we've ever talked to the hospitals as a group, to start, and they're very excited. So we will work with the Department of Health to try to figure out where are the most vulnerable hospitals, and so which are the hospitals that should be looked at first. FEMA, we look at to FEMA for funding this.
Is that HMGP? Or
Well, no, it'd be great.
It's, for Wilcox though, what?
Oh, that was HMG.
Sure.
Oh, in fact, I'm sorry. Where's the PDM?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I want to say it was Pete.
PDM?
Yeah, PDM, I think.
And a lot of that was Larry. Larry
It was PDM
very
17, I just closed it, yeah.
A lot of money for PDM.
Well, what they did is
Yeah.
Bucks matched
Overmatched.
$8 million. They provided most of the work. Whatever the limit was on our side,
I think I was like 3 something.
3 or 4, so whatever it was. Yeah, if there's a, I think on the relationship that we built with Hilton, DOH coming out of the pandemic, there's another look at, if you could do it with Wilcox, those could be very attractive, isolated communities. Those type of facilities would score very high, very fast. On the HMGP side, they would fit nicely. Brick is gonna be a little more challenging. Building code issue. Additional comments or questions for Elton?
Just want to thank you for the pun, talking about the levees and the argument not holding water.
And I know HACEM still owes the counties, we had modified 127 2 years ago now. With an EOP to CEMP transition, several of the counties have started their own CEMPs. HACEM did restructure our EOP earlier this year as part of the EMAP assessment, so further guidance will be coming, but we know that you all are actively moving in that direction.
Well, Luke, I wanted to just thank you folks for the EMPG. We're working on the MOA now, but it's just I apologize for delays. Ours takes a process of going through attorneys for review and counsel.
I understand we've made a lot of improvements on the grant side, so just it's a relationship on both sides. So
I'll just tell you, Luke, just to piggyback, for our EMPG MOA, explain to Naima that some of our staff salaries are funded out of that, and contract runs up at the on December 15th. So just really got to get these MOA in place. And so I, got delays on our side too, but I signed it, brought it 3 hours later. So it was like 3 hours. Unbelievable.
So real fast, I'll tell you a trick that we do. And they were suspicious of us at first because they thought we were going to sneak people in, but we don't. So we have our mayor and county council, our mayor's administration, county council, dollar fund certain positions, so that if the MOA doesn't come through, we can temporarily transfer county funds into it, and they don't have to take a break in service. I don't know if you can get away with that. We're a small county, but we dollar fund some of the positions. So.
I think that Helen Perry, who was Helen's predecessor on admin side, several years ago, HACEM basically had 1.5 working admin and finance. Have made a heavy investment supporting you. So we are very grateful and appreciate the comments that we're able to. In the past, MOAs would take weeks or months, maybe not even signed. So to do it in 3 hours is. So. All right, focus areas. So we have two presentations that a little bit of a deep dive here. I just want to be mindful of time, so about 10 till 1. We have you guys till 7:30 tonight, so appreciate it. Some people got flights to catch. So we're going to provide an overview on the Siren program and of the updates and improvements and kind of some on where we're going, and similar with the shelter retrofit. These are 2 large CIP programs that go back to the Civil Defense Days that HACEM has, and there's a shared responsibility with the products of these that support the county. So in the last year, we really have put a lot of effort into these programs. So Carlos will be sharing on Siren. Brenda will be on shelters.
Okay. As you all are aware, we do maintain the world's largest outdoor siren program. We have 408 sirens located throughout the state. Majority of which is right here on Oahu, a vast majority of 180 of that 408. Sirens are a legacy system, and most residents kind of connect with the siren program. And being fully transparent, back in January, during the incident, since that time, we've taken a deep dive in what our readiness is for sirens and really did an overall program review. And we're in the process of resetting the program. In full transparency, our current month readiness is at 71%, which fortunately is up 4% from the previous month. And we've already gotten our first did the siren test today. Fortunately, no complaints so far. Did have someone complain about the EAS scroller message being about 8 minutes long. So that's the only complaint so far this month. But in full transparency, I have 2 technicians that's able to travel to process and work on those 408 sirens. So as you can see, some severe staffing shortages with the program. We do have 2 staffing shortfalls that we're currently trying to track down throughout the state recruiting process. But those 2 staffing shortfalls against a signed table of organization. The budget process, we did request 8 additional personnel, radio technicians, in order to bump up that maintenance capability of what we want to do with those 8 personnel, putting them on outer islands so that we can facilitate more rapid repair and maintenance. Additional, had the opportunity to go out earlier part of last week to the residents of Mali. There's a siren out there that's been repeatedly vandalized. Had opportunity to meet with the local community and discuss some of the challenges associated with it. And we have requested some non-standard equipment, i.e. a bucket truck, to try to expedite performance of preventative maintenance. As you're aware, the sirens have a controller box, have batteries that's about 8 feet off the ground. So when they get vandalized, we want to be able to place those controllers a little bit higher so to prevent some of the vandalism, as well as some of the corrective maintenance associated with repairing solar panels and things like that when that happens. So a lot has gone into the siren program during the current CIP process. We get approximately 2.5 million for siren modernization. We requested an additional 2.5 million for some of the continued maintenance and shortfalls that we have in order to really get this program off the ground. We've invested here in HACEM a lot of due diligence and attention to the siren program because, again, you know, a legacy program that's gone on as long as the siren program. We just realized that some of the attention from the leadership in order to make sure this program's a viable program moving forward. So next slide. Again, we are really in being transparent. Here's how it looks. And this is as of October 5th. About 5 days from now, I'll get the next report. So it takes about 3 or 4 days. We process the report, just go through it a little bit. That inoperable column there can be anything from permanently damaged and requires total replacement. It can either be in a lava inundation zone in which the siren is no longer
The way
there.
we're calculating it.
Keep it there because the risk is
Predictive
a
about
mitigation
what actually
because
belongs.
it's not there. We keep it there for tracking purposes.
When you're way behind in
Replace that
preventive,
siren.
as far as
So the
battery change.
in-op can be a whole
I'll
host
get
of
the-
issues, but
I can show you what
permanently that
sound
siren
like.
no longer working. The maintenance column, which is red, means that siren had some issue which required a repair. Does not necessarily mean that siren won't sound, but it's like a check engine car light. When your check engine car light comes on, it may still run, but but you're not gonna, trust it to run forever. So that means we need to get it to the shop as soon as
Oh.
possible in order to do some, sort of repair. And the fully operational means that siren has no problem. It's fully operational. If the incident were to occur right now, we should be able to sound that siren. And so there you have it. We do current, and we try to show the delta from the current to the previous month to show what the trend lines are. We also have additional slides that show the maintenance issue, and we've broken those down from a priority 1 through 3. So a priority 1 means instant threat to life safety or public safety. Priority 2 may be like a battery app issue where siren has 6 batteries, may have 4 that operates, means the siren may still sound, but there's an issue that's associated with it. And a priority 3 can be anything from some broken driver lines or something, but it still operates. The next month, what we'll do, we'll also break down the inoperable, the sirens that's inoperable. And we'll start working on those to show not only where they are, but what's the issue associated with it and how many days that the siren's been out. Unfortunately, we have had some sirens in the black column that hasn't, in the spirit of full transparency, multiple years of just not working. Most of those are on a work order somewhere in the state process that we'll attempt to track down and attempt to like expedite. But some of it may be land issues, a variety of issues that's associated with it. So in order to give the command more visibility on that, we'll start accounting.
Of the maintenance, the number of sirens in the maintenance issue, how many of them are actually making them inoperable versus it's just,
Check engine
right?
So if you look over, like, so I'll take one. There's 4 sirens that's totally, they're not gonna work.
Right.
Those
Got it.
4, either it can be the siren may not even be there anymore, the hole fell down, whatever, that siren's just not gonna sound. The other 27, of that 27 is broken down from priority 1 through 3. A 1 may be, everything's perfect on that siren, but it doesn't sound. The speakers are bad. So if it doesn't sound,
It's not.
it's not working. Well, or it could be 4 out of the 8 amps aren't working, which if I push the button, the siren may sound. Don't know how long it is, but there's a risk associated with that siren. So there's always, well, if it works, why isn't it in the green? Well, I mean, again, if the check engine light's on, I need to be able to at least track and assign resources and allocate resources to that siren at some point in time. So by just identifying it, we identified it with a priority. So if it's a priority 2, okay, got it as a priority 2 in a non-risk zone versus a priority 1 in a risk zone. I mean, that with 2 tests, it allows me to focus resources on where I get the best bang.
So in the maintenance issue area, how many of them, since you're using co-op, how many of them are 1, 2, and 3?
I don't have that here with me today, so my apologies, but I can't get that information to you. I can just.
Okay, thank you.
So Carlos, the percentage you're showing is the fully operational out of the total.
Yes. So what's interesting is that prior to this past month with Oahu, because we didn't have the capacity, I didn't have the test to travel. They was doing a majority of the work here on Oahu. So you saw a big bump over the summer with Oahu. And that number went like way up. Like previously, Oahu was around the 70% mark. So they went up to 82%. So actually the 85%. And then a small bump because they went the past 2 trips, it was 3 trips with Molokai, Maui, and the Big Island. So you start seeing kind of bumps a little bit.
Carlos, do you have them mapped out as to which sirens are not working so we can kind of see which areas are there closed?
So what we've done, like, so when we first started this report, it was strictly a report. Then we tricked over to, showing this slide, and then we'll show by island with the our GIS component to it, which showed the overarching where the silos were coded, color coded in accordance with, how the charts in the table. So we do have that capability, so we do map that out by, location geographic.
That's something that you can share with.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
And most recently, we've been using it for some pre-planning as an example for Mauna Loa, Ocean View Estates, as an example. So there are some immediate life safety areas, tsunami ionization zone, hurricane, potential lava flow areas. We know that those sirens need to be ready to go from an alert warning perspective. So we've been trying to, in supporting Talmadge and obviously with just the maintenance of the system, use that as kind of a model, leveraging ArcGIS.
Luke, is that something that you would consider making viewable publicly?
So I believe as steward taxpayer dollars and from a public safety perspective, and every month we test these, that yes, that Carlos and the team have heard this, that the internal ArcGIS tool could be made public within seconds. Comms director over there and my logistics branch chief may strangle me. You know, every month we do these tests. I did a test today and the same people, same
Yeah, no, that's the reason why I'm asking.
same
Those-
elected official.
Send them to the link and say,
Right.
okay, here's the status, right?
So the problem is that you can come clean and say, like we've been doing monthly, partners are getting this monthly brief now, the EMOs, the governor, Director Hara, you all. Problem is, what are you doing about it? And when Carlos goes back to the previous slide and says he has 2 radio techs and we don't have a bucket truck, but we're getting $3.5 million or $3 million a year to put in a new siren, that doesn't do anything for the red. So this one's important to me. Lots of conversations with Mayor Kim. This is the threat that's killed the most people in the state. And right now, when we do go public with this, the scrutiny on HAEMA is going to be very tough. So we had some internal goals here to share this information publicly before hurricane season. And the more that Carlos starts to further peel the onion on this, it's hard. So yes, I want to. I think we should, and we will. But these, like with your soft pres, these are our passive ways of starting to make sure everyone's comfortable when Hilton sees that 45% of his sirens are in the red. That Gina from, you know, a certain news organization is going to immediately sink her teeth to, hey, what does that mean? So we want to be confident in the data for the DAG and the TAG and everyone. More importantly, when the tsunami bell rings or the mountain goes off, I want to be able to tell you all, hey, we didn't have this level of fidelity in January with the Tonga tsunami, and now we do. So when Mauna Loa goes, and whether it's Ocean View Estates or it's Kona or it's Waipalo or it's Hilo or Hala, we want to be able to tell Elton, hey, those sirens, we can't rely on them. Or, hey, we got to get some other type of alert warning out there. So we're open to recommendations. Again, we briefed you all a little bit of this on the summertime, but these things are iconic, man. These are the last elected official that we briefed on this, was it 2 or 3 weeks ago, used the air raid sirens term. And I understand it, but I start telling them that, you know, the 285 are green and really those are all not green. How do you that? So there'll be a tip jar, you know, if you guys want to give some money to the siren program at the end of the meeting, we would appreciate that. But, we are working with the DAG and the TAG. Some requests for resources, understanding that those compete with a lot of them. So, other comments or questions for Carlos?
Just one that particular.
The first on the interoperable black is having a conversation you would think is stays investing $2.5 million and you can, I mean, my Ely sirens broken. That's the fix. A CIP infrastructure perspective, that's a 2 to 4 year endeavor if we get all of our easements, if everything goes okay. So I think being transparent with the public is the first thing that we need to do. And that will help with monthly tests. But we rely heavily on DAGs for CIP. Those projects are 2 to 4 years at best, and it won't move the first column very fast. More resources, the maintenance can be tightened up, so we can have a higher percent of what our actual. Additional comments or questions?
Just clarification on the staffing. So you have currently 2 out of 4 positions filled and you're asking for 8 more. Is that right?
So, when I got here, I had 4 radio technicians, 3 radio technicians, 1 and 1 radio
Ours are
technician.
two of ours need complete replacement.
Magically,
2 just need repair
a
of 4.
position opened up here
So
over
that
the
should not
summer.
be enough. It should be under me.
That stated that we were recruiting.
It's
and this
inoperable
position
because
had been open
2 got hit
for
by
radio
lightning that
technician
don't
1.
work. No,
So-
1 got hit by lightning.
A month
That's
later, I
local,
have 1
so it cannot shut.
resignation from a radio
One
technician.
Another dolphin is
And on top of that,
at a
I
scrap and we're
currently have
with a new one.
3 radios, so you just follow with me. I have 3
Contractor
currently in
couldn't do
the
it because of the weight
office.
limit on the bridge and
But
also
1,
the
for lack of a better
lubrication.
term, is
We
undeployed.
haven't done it.
So I have 2 that's able to travel and conduct maintenance. throughout the city.
Kiliakai,
So
upscale community.
with the
They
third,
just that got hit by lightning.
Inoperable
you know,
or maintenance issue.
that,
Yeah, and here I think
I'm-
it speaks to the question about kind of playing this out for public.
Yeah.
And Carlos's analogy, check engine light is an apt one,
Yeah.
because sometimes the check engine light comes on because the sensor's plugged, not because there's anything wrong with the engine. And because he doesn't have people he can send to those outer islands, we don't know how accurate a lot of those red sirens are. Actually, problem is reading it, something wrong with the reporting system. If we can't put eyes on them in person. we don't have people. So I'm hesitant to open the door to a public communications issue that identifies only the smaller percentage of the green column as working, when we can't confirm yes or no. We know there's a problem, but we don't know if it's a functional problem or a reporting problem without having the resources that Carlos is asking. So we're trying to sort of add message.
erring on the side of caution versus just saying, oh, they're all working today. One last note, the way we do our analysis now, it really drives our maintenance and the way where we travel. It's sort of when I brief this to Luke on a monthly basis, he actually can look and say, well, absolutely, we should be in this area repairing these sirens. It's almost a natural progression showing, the data. The data kind of pushes you toward that. So we're doing our best. I mean, sometimes our best isn't good enough, so we continue to push towards, trying to push these numbers up and pushing the guys. I mean, they understand the situation that we're in. I had a good meeting with the 2 that traveled here recently, and they were like, hey, we're, as long as we can get the support, they're happy to go out and do as much as possible, understanding the constraints we're under. Again, a good example was the one in Maui. They were like, hey, the siren's been out. We repaired that siren 3 weeks in a row. And the person went out and ripped it apart each time. The last time being, unfortunately, he ripped all the wires out. And have a video from the shop across the street showing the vandalism to it. So in those cases, it's not much more we can do until your dad's involved, we can push that project out. So the battery can. I mean, so, yes, so, some resources can solve some of this, but, you know, and just getting the bodies is the challenge.
Additional comments or questions, Carlos? This is priority from public education standpoint. What is, with the new technology, new hardware, what's the effective range of the sirens?
Siren can sound for about 3,400 feet.
And did, with some of the legislative, I want to say, packages that pushed developers to put sirens in areas that add to your maintenance problems in areas?
So the 2.5 for that is for modernization and new installations. My focus is for those current sirens in high risk areas. So I tend to focus on those, public safety versus a nice to have. So some directed leadership towards where sirens go and what our focus should be.
I think that, just to clarify Darrell's comment, we've had this conversation in a couple of different meetings this year. Kind of the crest, riding the wave of tsunami infrastructure in the state. I always use, you know, the Costco in Kaluka Boulevard on Oahu. Why is there a siren going in that new development, Koa Ridge? From a hazard perspective, I struggle with that. They're not behind a big dam. They're not tsunami inundation zone, a hurricane inundation zone. But you all as leadership were so effective with ingraining sirens, planted the seed, whatever, many years ago, where developers by county code are now, whatever that cross is in each of the counties, they put sirens in as a requirement. I think maybe if, correct me if I'm wrong, Darrell, the question may be is that needs to be modified in moving into 2023 from an alert warning perspective. Now, I'd rather give everyone an all hazard radio. It would be cheaper for the developer and HACEM wouldn't have one because every siren that goes in, HACEM is responsible for. That's separate from the CIP investment that we're making. So we kind of briefly talked about this, I think, early part of this year, to manage side, but I think that may be a conversation for 2023 is do we look at amending some county code and say, unless it's in an inundation zone, we're not asking developers to put sirens in. But that's, I'm not sure if that's where you're going, Darrell. I apologize.
Yeah, I suppose I think from a legislative, is there opportunity to discuss similar to, say, the housing or affordable housing requirements? If there isn't an opportunity in that development, it could benefit other areas. So whether it's the funding to a maintenance program, rather than putting a siren in a location, it's not really necessary.
Like a TDR for sirens.
The developer's gonna put that money in. I mean, you know, it should go to right.
Yeah, that's awesome. I know who to sell that to too. Additional comments or questions for Carlos on the sirens? Okay, Linda has privilege to share about the shelter retrofit program and some updates there.
And we'll go fast. Okay, so the next slide, we started in 2006, legislative appropriation. As David said, they gave us about $3 million every other year. As you all know, HACEM, as all other agencies have gone through a number of people. I can't even count how many people have touched this program. So, what has resulted is that there are very few internal documents available, complete documents showing what has happened, and our partners have the same kind of incomplete files that we have. So after 10 years, we started doing a programmatic review, led by David Lopez, trying to figure out what exactly happened and where are we. In 2021, we began doing a strategy. trying to be transparent and trying to be clear that what was in the past is no longer the business. And in 2022, we finished the procedural. So what we found out is, in the old plan, they were going to 3 different standards, B, A, and HPA, which is a category. And we also found is that because of the missing documentation, we couldn't tell to what level shelter standard these projects were being completed at. We knew they were being completed, but we couldn't verify to what level. And some of the funds that were being used for, well, they were calling it retrofit, but it was not retrofit as we see it now. That could have included painting and deferred maintenance. So under the new program, buildings that receive the funds will be identified by the county, and when it's completed, the county knows that they are brought up to a shelter level and that they can be used as shelters as the county sees. Because as you know, the county determine shelters to be at. There's also increased HACEM staff involvement from beginning to end. So it's my hazard mitigation team. We actually started a new section to talk about, because this is much larger than we expected. There is start off with a structural engineering assessment, and like the siren program, this is not a 1-year project. This is a 2 to 4 year project, because it just takes so long. It took us 2 months to get the funding allocated from the legislature down to us to start using. I mean, just it's so slow. Right now, DAGS is asking me, what do I want to do structural assessments on? And I gave them 2 names, and they said, can you have more? Because it's going to take up to 6 months to get it locked in. And if those 2 fall out, then we got nothing. So they're asking me for more. So we're learning to be very specific and to plan out further. And we're watching our dollars. Slide, please. The other thing that we are found out, and which is new, is that we can match federal dollars. So previously, we were only using state dollars. So we were constrained to the 3 million, which really made it difficult, because to bring up HPA, depending on the condition of the building, we could be running $5 million. So, you know, my $3 million not going to go too far. But with the federal match, we can do a lot more. But with that federal match, I have to bring it up to HPA level. I cannot go any lower, and that's the challenge. Because one is it going to take longer, and it's going to cost more money. Okay, next slide, please. So we start out with the county selection, and all the counties ask them select, you know, their best candidates. We asked for 3 to 4, and then we started going through the process of evaluating to determine which were going to be the best candidates for retrofit. We coordinate with the counties as we go through this so that they understand why a project may fall out. Interesting, we've had at least one project fall out when we were talking to the Department of Education, and they said, oh, you know, it's already in our works to be repaired. Like, oh, how come nobody knew this? Or how come everybody wasn't talking to each other? So this has opened up a lot of very good dialogue between the counties and DAGs. Okay, we are also asking the counties to collect a lot more information that they had. So if we could go to the next slide. So the selection criteria, you can see, as David mentioned earlier, we're looking at the age of the buildings, because that tells us about what kind of materials. We're also looking at maintenance, and that is so important, because if the building hasn't been maintained or improved, we don't know really the condition it's in. We are also looking at capacity. We're looking at what shelters are close by. We're looking at the populations being served. We're also looking at the hazards. So it's not just, this is a really great building, but really, is this in the appropriate place? So right now, we are not looking at any infrastructure in flood zones. We are looking at larger, newer buildings, and everything gets a score. Select things. So after the county provide this information for us, we are actually, can I get the next slide, please?
Previous next.
Thank you. We have to verify all this information. So my team goes out to visit, take pictures, talk to the managers. And at the school level, we are actually talking to the maintenance people because we're finding that sometimes the schools didn't really realize what was happening. Some of the retrofit, some of the things that were retrofitted were taken off. So we want to make sure that the school understands that they are being retrofitted to a shelter and that so after we get through all of this, we then come down to determine which candidates are the best eligible for the retrofit. So the next slide, you will see the 2022 list. And we have for Hawaii County, Lapa Hoi Hoi, we've been out to see them. So far, so good. Maui, we went to Lanai High. I'm sorry, we went to Molokai High. Honolulu, we're, let's see, we're at Wailua. And Kauai, we are still talking. I thought we were looking at the community college. Again, we're at the beginning of the process, so we are still doing the structural assessments. That's the next step. And then the structural assessment will also tell us what has to get done, how much it's going to cost. And then we'll have to determine which projects first. Have any questions?
Questions or comments for Linda?
I do. Is this just primarily with schools? Or
It's up to the county. So they could choose a DOE facility or a county facility.
like library or park?
So the libraries are of course state, and the libraries have indicated that they do not want to be shelters because of the contents and staffing that we require. So Elton, I'm assuming that they've told you guys that too.
Yeah, we haven't really taken an interest in most of those,
Too small.
and lots of glass usually.
Oh, that's correct. That's true.
Because Hero kind of stated it earlier, when you go to schools as shelters, you really take them out of the ability to be a school.
It's really difficult because you're right, not only during the shelter time, but even during the retrofit time. Because if we take a gym, you're closing that gym for, the summer, if you're lucky, maybe longer than the summer.
That's one of the reasons why the retrofit program, the way it used to be run, would take so long. And one of the reasons why nothing got retrofitted to its standard, because you're looking at these just very short windows of opportunity to build, because they're not gonna shut down schools for that. So the biggest projects is over the course of summers, consecutive summers. I think the average would be, did it was 3 to 5 years for a retrofit project. That was assuming you were going to get a retrofitted building to meet a certain standard.
And really, realistically, the cost for the retrofitting is just escalating so fast. Molokai High, DOE has talked to us about asking us to put in our money to bring it to a level A, not even to an A level, just to an A, because they've run out of money. And so to bring it to an A, they want, to bring it to an A, I think they need like 2.5 million. And to do it to the next level, they need 5 million. So everything's costing so much money.
Additional comments or questions for Linda?
So how do you line up the timing of the state dollars and mitigation dollars? And then you got to consider the school schedule, right?
It's
And then
tough.
running up against.
Thanks.
performance period for the grant.
No, it's
But-
very tough. And that's one of the reasons why we want to match it with the federal dollars, because it'll give us more time. That'll give us up to 6 years.
For the state dollars, but you still got the time.
I know, but the
Grant, right?
state dollars, I'm still stuck with the 3 years. So that's why DAGS is so
Yeah.
insistent that we get our assessments in now,
Mhm.
and so they can start the process.
The DAGS managed projects I've seen, they kind of time it for summer vacation. Things like that.
There's been a lot of effort in the last year with DOE, the DAG, and the counties, because, to end up with a priority list, the previous methodology was just behind the closed door. People could have a bunch of buildings that were retrofitted in his county that were DOE buildings. And in the end, we had no additional shelter capacity. So, Hero kind of talked about the immediate with the BARA and how do we use what we have.
Mm.
This is more of a longer term resiliency conversation that instead of taking $3.5 million and spreading the peanut butter thin, we're supersizing that money as the 25% match for federal funds. Which, think about this, if the state invested $10 million and we went after large chunks of money, we could retrofit a lot of buildings. So by using the federal funds and ultimately getting priorities from the county, it's taken a different mindset from the HACEM team. The resilience branch and David have really worked hard to foster that relationship. It takes a lot. And it's bad because every hurricane season, the first thing is where's the shelter? How come it's not ready? Well, we get it. But these are 5 to 10 year type projects that we're looking at. So monster hurricane of 2023. I may not be able to help yet, but we are planting those seeds for that CIP. So, comments or questions?
So Mona had commented about schools, yeah. An issue for us, and probably, for Hero would share the concern, is that, you look at our list there. So something like Kilauea Gym, it's a county gymnasium, was built to old Cat 2 standards, Iniki era time, and we want to harden it. Has an internal kitchen, locker room, restrooms, that's good. Kalaheo Neighborhood Center, similar. But the bathrooms have not been retrofitted, but they are part of the same overall structure, though there's some exposure when you walk. At the schools, the restrooms are all external and you got to walk away from the shelter to get there. So for us, we really favor the larger complexes, not the classrooms if possible, but sometimes that's all we got in a district or in an area. So
I can understand when you're, the inventory that you have is so small, you really don't have many options to start from. But the problem with schools is that even after a disaster, let's say you open it as a shelter, if it's still operating as a shelter come Monday, kids can't go to school.
yeah.
If that's going to be.
So I think most of the counties, our thought is that's to survive the storm. And for longer term congregate care, we would look at other facilities like surviving neighborhood centers, other things besides
It's difficult
schools. Yeah.
to people. I
Yeah.
found that it's very difficult to people, especially people who don't have transportation or are hard to, they have mobility issues just from the start, whatever those are. So the best case scenario is you pick the spot that's going to be can also serve as the term shelter. Schools just are so complicated. They have a mission, and that's to educate children.
You're still left with the problem, like we were talking about, just the lower end building stock for serving shelter.
Yeah.
Lucky to see what might be standing out.
So it's just to keep in mind, if you
Yeah.
can choose another facility over picking a school, I think it's wiser to choose.
Yeah,
that.
that's why in the retrofit now, all county buildings are open, all government buildings are open to it, not the DOE is still the primary participant, but it's open to all government.
And just one follow-up question, DOE a special district, are they under, does the state control?
They're quasi-state agency, but we don't have a junior taxing authority. not a junior task. Okay. There's just one. So there is a new school facilities board, school facilities authority that's responsible for all CIP. And, you know, the next kind of, the jump in this conversation is actually not to do this. The conversation with the school facilities authority is to take the new building that they're building on Maui and to build that to this level.
Yeah.
They already have a program CIP. You know, one could say from a business perspective, why do this? If you lined up the similar types of capacities for new infrastructure in the next 3 to 5 years in each county by the school facilities authority, you could take the same money and just build that into a new, but that's kind of the next level of conversation. Not building new schools to that standard.
Or like any other county or government building where you can harden a certain section of it to
Right.
increase your space would be faster and better than simply retrofit. Or even doing prefab hardened retrofits where you could bring in a prefab building and it'd be hardened to, as much like a tornado shelter in the Midwest. Could all be produced here, so you have an economy piece on that too. But then they have them with restrooms in it, showers in it. There's all varieties of it, which would probably again be much cheaper, especially if you just look at straight retrofit. But it's very hard for us to begin for those funds.
In Kauai, we're lucky. Kauai High School is building a new sports complex. They already broken ground. The concrete frame is up. I mean, the outer walls are up. And it's gonna be a EHPA shelter with internal showers, bathrooms, everything. Then Waimea High School will be next doing a similar design. And then Kapa'a hasn't gotten funding yet, so.
So this may be a good, like, you know, good talking points for you all, for the new governor. Obviously, we're gonna have the same superintendent. Kurt, that was the comptroller, is now at the school facilities. This is an opportunity that maybe for 2023 priorities, that having some senior officials around the state talk about what we're trying to do. There are obviously other opportunities here, but this one gets the most focus. How many buildings has HACEM registered? We haven't registered any buildings. We have strategically set ourselves up now that with the federal funds in several years, we will have buildings to a standard, but this could be a fun school project for you all. We pay a lot too, so. Any additional?
And to the highest standard that the state's ever done.
Right, yes.
uniformly.
So when you get, you know, you see those individuals that produce legislative proposals that talk about, you know, wanting to increase X buildings to a certain standard and they just die in pledge. We need one or two of those type of proposals and a champion that says, okay, yeah, we're gonna make that investment. But in the meantime, we've turned the corner on this procedural perspective. It's just gonna take time to leverage. And I think Governor Ige and Director Har have been supporters of us matching these funds to the mitigation funds, which puts us in a much different level. If you could do that 3 or 4 fiscal years in a row, you could really start to see 5, 10, 15 years out, a number of shelter capacity. Additional questions on the shelter program?
Has anyone looked at churches as a shelter?
Interesting that you should say that.
Okay.
Yes, so we have informally started talking to church about, because they under FEMA guidelines, they are considered eligible structures to be hardened, but not necessarily to a shelter standard. Because the shelter standard, you're talking, you know, $5 million at that point, right? But we could harden to be used. Maybe as well. I don't know.
Just, I think that burdened or not, they tend to, in a lot of communities, be shelters.
Yeah.
They're gonna shelter the parishioners. So hard. the thing there, you might want to, developing a training for them. No, should you get yourself and go,
How do you protect your-
with them to help them see, what's involved in it.
Yeah.
And FEMA used to have, years ago, they had some sort of a program where they had, they would put people in states and that person would work on that kind of stuff. In bigger cities, kind of develop stuff. It's out there, to just get and copy.
No, I think it's a good idea.
Additional comments, questions on the shelter presentation? All right, thank you. Some HACEM updates, kind of wrote them to some of you that have been. So you've seen this slide throughout the year. Be firing up our 2023 priorities. Stuff on the left are just kind of big picture ones. Talk a little bit about the ENAP assessment, which is programmatic assessment. The right-hand side is just the branches here in HACEM operations. Talk a little bit about NLE 2024. Matthew has a couple of slides, and the governor's transition, which we kind of mentioned earlier. Disasters don't care about bureaucracy transitions. All types of fun stuff happen across the globe in the United States. So just being ready for that. On the resiliency side, got a whole bunch of open disasters that highlighted. Talked about the shelter retrofit and siren program, and external affairs with the a bit of a session. Blueprint from the fourth quarter of 2021, and I think we did a good job in kind of sourcing these and laying out our larger vision. This is just a reminder and opportunity with you all. We do have a comprehensive emergency management plan. Hero kind of mentioned a little bit. Elton mentioned what they're doing in their restructure. The structure was signed off by Governor Ige back in February, and we got kind of 3 levels, and then we have our 5 volumes, and documents like the old emergency operations plan are in the respond volume under here because it's a response document along with a whole bunch of others. So it just helps us from a documentation perspective. In the past, we had it as one large document. Any updates that we did, this became administrative. Continue to build up. We do have this up on our website, and we do have an internal site that we share for students. Mauna Loa, for those of you who attended the HEPIC meeting last week. Okay, so obviously Mauna Loa is always active. Largest shield volcano in the world. If you go down to the base, there are a number of areas historically that are impacted with a couple of types of threats, whether it's gas emissions or lava or just geologic activity. Since in 1843, there have been 33 eruptions, averaging about every 5 years. Guarantee when you talk about frequency and hazards, but do the math. 19, most of them occurred. So start talking about things and try to communicate statistics about disasters. Wasn't alive in 1950, Luke. So what are you talking about? And it occurs every 5 years, but 84 and 75, and it's 2022. So statistics and hazards, please be careful because you could lose your audience real fast. Bottom line is 33 eruptions since 1843. Anybody was in the room here back then. Most of those eruptions occurred prior to 1950, and they average about 3.5 years. So geologically speaking, Mauna Loa is in a little different active phase, 1843 to 2022, and I think that's an important piece. 2 big eruptions that were separated by 25 years, 75 and 84. And those eruptions, one was at the summit. 50% of the eruptions actually stay in the summit, which is good news. as an administrator, coming in after Kilauea, fall before, the lava re-erupted, in the park in Kilauea. I didn't know what that meant. I quickly realized it was good for the economy and wasn't a threat to the public. Obviously, if we have an eruption that stays in the summit of Mauna Loa, it's probably good for tourism, a tremendous media crush on the county and the state, but no real threat. But if you have something like 84 and the eruption emanates down this rip zone towards Hilo, you all know the saddle between Mauna Kea and Mauna Loa. It's very flat. If you've seen those flows, just kind of opens up and turns into, you can walk out of the way of the lava. Versus what we saw in 2018 with Kilauea, where you had very fast streams of lava. Or if you look at stuff off of the southwest rift zone here into our lovely area south of Kona, where the lava could be to the coast in hours. So depending on where an eruption originates from, you could impact Hilo, you could impact Waikoloa, Kona, South Point, Pala, all different areas with drastic different impacts. Bottom line is, Glenda brought up isolated communities, like with many of the hazards in Hawaii, Big Island have potentially numerous isolated communities. Two big, just kind of education on the hazards. We're very good with hurricanes and floods. You have a ground-based system that goes green to red. I'm colorblind, but the USGS has done a nice job with their pyramid symbol, and we're in the yellow phase, which basically means the mountain has gone into a phase of unrest. It doesn't necessarily an eruption is imminent, but you should be warned, and that's what Civil Defense and HACEM and USGS have been preaching to the public in the last month. Hey, it's like heightened period of unrest. You live in a active lava zone area or potential rift zone area. Pay attention. We also have the aviation colors, which have a similar type of green to red, again in a yellow. Good news, historically speaking, Mauna Loa is not a big, tall Mount St. Helens type, where we're going to shoot stuff, 60, 70,000 feet up into the atmosphere. But Mauna Loa is already at 14,000 feet, so it wouldn't take much to cause a disruption, not only to Kona and Hilo, but depending on prevailing trade winds, that could quickly, and we've seen it with Kilauea, send things back across the islands. So the aviation one is important for a number of our partners. 2 o'clock, so we're going to Mauna Loa update. But USGS puts out a thing called a VAN, which is the volcano activity notice, and these are put out daily at this point in time. So you can sign up for these. HAIMA has been proactive with Talmadge and the county of pushing out information on a daily basis, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Again, 2 different types of alert systems, and one for ground and one for air, and we're both yellow. So spend a couple of minutes here. And the picture on the bottom, it says in the summit. Wow, beautiful, really cool thing if you're a volcano and geology lover. Obviously, if it emanates in one of the rift zones, going to have a much different scenario on our hands. So we do have team members here that were here for 2018 or 2014 or 1950 or 1984, or 1975. As Daryl smiled, this is not the first time that Hawaii is going to be dealing with a volcano. And so if you have any thoughts or questions about the threat or lessons learned, wanted to spend a couple of minutes and just provide the HACEM members to kind of share a little bit from an incident management. There's lots of lessons learned. Administrator Travis did a statewide AER from the volcano incident in 2018. Kilauea is different than Mauna Loa. We all know that. So just kind of open it up. Questions on the Mauna Loa threats, or any type of insight on Mauna Loa that you want to share?
84, that was the flow that headed toward Hilo. the Big
Yeah,
Island.
20 some odd days, yes.
Yep. So any planning information that you can get out of that?
So there's an active effort right now. Talmadge has invited one of our operational team members to participate with kind of planning scenarios. The general idea from other volcano, so there's no volcano documentation in the state. There's old civil defense documentation. When Haima was SCD, there was actually a volcano document, but won't go there. The infamous yellow book. Do the yellow book. It's not. But the larger direction from the state, from an operational supporting, you have a Waikoloa type of incident, which it gets in the saddle by Billy's property. You've got basically Kona down south, which is a very fast type of flow. You've got the Hilo run into the saddle, which most of those, they don't go. And then you have some stuff off the Pahala. Most of the Pahala ones really haven't, the geography flattens out. So you could see 4 or 5 kind of planning scenarios, depending on which rift zone it goes in, which then we would work with state agency partners to support Talmadge as they start to scale up. So.
But you can't do anything like divert, can you?
That was attempted in the 1900s, but I don't that it's recommended.
That option out there.
So yeah, there's some great historical documentation on dropping bombs on lava. It's a volcano movie too, where they. So, no, I don't think after what we saw in 2018 and the amount of flow and that 1935 example, that wouldn't be recommended. So. Other questions or thoughts or insight? Some of you that obviously live on the Big Island. Yes, sir, Billy.
I was 10 years old. 1950, my dad happened to be the quarantine master for Hilo Harbor, which meant he dealt a lot with shipping lines and the Coast Guard. That would be when foreign vessels would arrive with freight, but with a person on board that's sick, they couldn't dock. My dad would be taken out on a boat, climb up and examine the person. That went on for years. When the 1950 flow started, the Coast Guard wanted to do something nice for my father. They took myself, my mom, and my 3 sisters, and we spent 3 days off the coast of the 1950 Opaloa flow. And that was a remarkable opportunity for me to see that. 20 years later, I returned and I was a veterinarian for the very 10-year-old guys that had to run away, literally run to get ahead of what happened. One of them, many of the people that own land reclaimed their land, although it was covered with lava. One of them, when he got ready to build his home about 20 years or so, build a new home, he went to do a cesspool. And he came across a tin roof. He opened the tin roof. It was his father's saddle house. And although the leather was charred, the spurs, the bits, and everything metal was still hanging on where they were. And a lot of remarkable stories that come out of there. But the thing that I think is appropriate is when you gave about 5 different ways in which that mountain and load. And that means everybody's got to be on alert. There is no safe zone if you're on the slope of that huge mountain.
Yeah, I think that's live on the side of a volcano. You need to, you as big, you live with it every day, and I think some of the education that USGS and civil defense are doing right now with, have a go kit, know your evacuation area, know areas that you live in. Lava is kind of like flooding in some respects. It follows the topography. So. Dallas, comments?
Well, I was gonna say, another thing just to keep in the back of our minds, is as the event prolongs and there's concern for what area could be impacted, what we've seen in the past is the insurance industry start to cancel policies. So just keeping it, always thought that we're gonna start to get complaints from residents saying my insurance carrier notified me my policy.
Had some conversation with Doug Lay, who's the recovery lead for the Big Island. Again, Kilauea 24, you can just choose a decade, and Big Island, that community development block grant money to buy people out through the voluntary buyouts right now. Continue to say that this unrest with Mauna Loa, is going to cause more conversation, because it is in areas outside of the Kilauea. We have had people resettle in areas that now the county is actively buying people out. So the expectation may be in 2023 or 2024 is, whether it's FEMA money or HUD money, somebody's going to come in several years down the road and buy me out. There are some very complex recovery issues with since the buyout has started, that now you have another incident. So is there precedent? We talked about land use and building code issues earlier. These are all Big Island issues, but if you let people rebuild, then you're buying people out, then you have another incident. This is classic. As a mitigator, I'm so proud of what Big Island is doing with the buyouts and taking care of those survivors. Then I think about like my timeshare is in Keo Bay and beautiful lava field, not, maybe a quarter of a mile down the road, and type of flows, and that would just totally, I'm not sure the longer term issues with this discussions. Other questions or comments on Mauna Loa?
I just have a comment. Some states have state-sponsored insurance programs that are specific for the disaster in those states, which major insurance policies won't cover. Is that something that maybe, state could sponsor, like volcano insurance?
It was a hurricane fund after Niki, and then it got raided. Seasoned EMs in the room could discuss. I'm not sure volcano, because it would be specific to Big Island.
Yeah.
How that would go if there was a state fund, but it's something that.
Respectively, it's typically the states that started up their after the insurance companies. So it's like Florida with flood insurance and everything.
California with
California.
big insurance.
But it's typically done after the insurance companies have pulled out, and then usually it's right after. The people within the states didn't have that insurance or have access to that insurance. According to most of the SEC state economic corporations, place there, the insurance companies need private events and those states and pull out. So unless insurance companies decided to start telling the state of Hawaii that we're going to pull out, typically the economic perspective is to be said they're still going to be.
Let's see, if people are getting their insurance policies canceled, writings on the wall.
Are they getting them canceled? But this is historically it has happened.
That did happen after 2018 in low reserve zone, as opposed to the lava zone that you're in. But the real question is if you get lava to Waikoloa or the Southwest Rift Zone, just with the topography there, you kind of exposed there are individuals who have built in some of these areas where they're not, they may have to have already been on the secondary market for insurance, so.
It's also the argument is it's a business. So. Gotcha. Stated earlier, way above our pay grade. But it's a question there, and now you're talking about the building specifically, and lava zones are high risk lava zones.
They're taking their chances.
They're, you know,
Yeah.
there's a real good chance that probably, some of those folks probably.
There were some examples in 2018 with Lloyd's of London. There were individuals in Leilani Estates that, and not the first time lava's been through there and people bought, but there were secondary insurance. Lloyd's was insuring individuals. I think from our perspective, the immediate concern is life safety, out of harm's way, than providing whatever assistance. I had the same conversation about insurance. Because the hurricane fund would probably have a bigger exposure to, or post tsunami. All the infrastructure that is in a tsunami inundation zone. And if those individuals don't have flood insurance, their homeowner's insurance is not going to cover after tsunami. Those two, the hurricane and the tsunami, be a great conversation with DCCA about the need for that, because if we had statewide tsunami inundation, people would get FEMA assistance, but if they don't have flood insurance, if I was insured, if you don't have flood insurance, you're in that zone.
It's also a consideration. It says that you make it also, just knowing the potential by laws. Again, it's a political question.
Yeah.
That's way above, but at the same time, I hear what you're saying, and my heart does go out to the people that are in these areas, but that's a lot of considerations. That's one of the big things when flood insurance became a requirement. Then the builders were able to say, and the sold properties were able to say, protected, and flood insurance, you're good. So all of a sudden, more building.
I bring it up because as he said, you know, policies start to get canceled, questions start to arise, and you might get asked some questions, and you should have some ideas about responses.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Messaging. Critical.
We know what happened to New Orleans. They are rebuilding after, I don't know how many times that they flooded out.
Have been played out many times. Galveston, Texas is the classic example of that right there. They've been trashed and crashed, total completely 3 times that I'm aware of.
Still get insurance.
But they still get insurance.
I think that's what the larger conversation said. It came up at NEMA, and it's come up in other conversations in the last year. Flood insurance, most people usually buy because they lived in a special flood hazard area or a coastal velocity zone. But with the rain intensities that we've seen, just look at the Kona low last December. We had 8 inches of rain in downtown Honolulu in areas, most of those people didn't have flood insurance. So any losses that they had, we had to try to stitch together federal assistance, which we weren't very successful on, besides some SBA loans. So I think with the precip events that we're having, the 70s and 80s flood maps, hey, yeah, you get it because you live in a area map. I'm not sure the federal government can continue financing the flood insurance program with the type of extreme precip events, just because people are flooding outside of those map flood hazards. But again, this may be a good conversation as a HACEM body to have about insurance, to leverage some of your skills and past experience. Additional comments or questions on Mauna Loa? Cognizant of time. Okay. State agency readiness, the operations branch as part of the NAP accreditation process. We really looked at the documentation that we had. Excited to say that all of our state agencies that are a state ESF lead have a signed document. There's more work to do behind those documents, except for search and rescue, which is DLNR. So a big shout out to the operations branch and the state ESF partners. Basically spent a 9 to 12 months in rebuilding these, aligned with the current situation. Accreditation. So we hit about 75% on our baseline assessment through the emergency manager accreditation program, which is a big testament to a lot of the folks in the room and just kind of retooling how we build processes and documents that outlive people that are in them. There's been a lot of changeover in HAEMA, and this will be a good kind of a value add. We still have not received a preliminary report. Time, maybe this month, that we may be presenting to the committee. About 5 areas, about 25%. From this phase forward, the program review committee would look at our body of work. They would make a recommendation to the commission, and most likely we would not be accredited because of the deficiencies, but we would have 9 months potentially to become conditionally accredited. So that's my vision as we poke into 2023. And that would be I think a tremendous turnaround for HAEMA. We could go to be nationally accredited basically by next summer or next fall. So after action reports, we have a couple of large. We've been using a tidal basin through an emergency management contract. State COVID AAR document. Hope to have a final this month to share with the director, the governor. The counties participated. Some of you may have participated. High level themes is what we ended